Today's episode is brought to you by you. The reality is that this podcast, whilst it's clearly the best podcast in all of history, is not going to get the numbers of viewers that can sustain ad revenue and things like that from other platforms. So we need support from you guys. YouTube's not going to pay the bills. Patreon might. Patreon is a little thing that you can sign up for, where you can support us each month with small little payments. And I'm working on something, a little gift, a little way of saying thank you. That is an exclusive thing that you get for anyone who has signed up for the Patreon account. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But for all those people who have signed up and who do give a little bit of money to support the podcast, thank you very much. You are the people keeping the lights on in the podcast. Thank you. Let's get back into the episode. All right, welcome to today's episode of the Australian Lawn and Garden podcast. We have a very fantastic guest. We have Ashley James from Ashley James Gardens. Which one is the business name? Gardens. Yep. I mean, you think, after everything that's happened before and lead up to this, that you thought I was incredibly professional, but we won't tell that story.
Yeah.
He'll say, let's paint him a quick picture. If you guys don't follow this guy on Instagram, what are you doing with your life? But you've been doing this since you basically came out of the womb. You're a gardener at heart. Yeah. You've got a bunch of people on Instagram. Your reels are fantastic. Your advice is fantastic. You're running a business that does really cool work. You've been on the block. You write articles with different people. But you're a family guy. You got all this stuff going on. But most importantly, you're a fan of the Zinger box, right? So we know you're somebody we can trust.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
We're just joking before. You were saying you were in the KFC drive-thru listening to the podcast, looking at a story and thought, what's my life become, basically?
4 days later and I'm on the podcast.
Well,
my life is complete.
I loved it when you messaged because I think I've been following you on my business page since before the podcast was around. I don't know if you knew that, but Silverstone Gardening, my business page, which, to be fair, I'm not much of an Instagram guy. I only really got into it since getting on the podcast. I'm a big YouTube guy. I love YouTube. So I'll watch for whatever reason. I don't know. That's just, I don't even have TikTok, right? Like the idea of just going on.
YouTube for you, man, would be because everything with the lawns and all that kind of stuff, that started with the Keith Kalfas and all those guys on YouTube over in the US, and it was just huge. So I think that's probably why you're on it, man, because there's a huge following of all that stuff over there.
But what's happened with the podcast is now I'm really into just finding Australian people who are doing cool things, right? But whatever happened, I don't know how long I've been following you, but at some point I must have stumbled across something going, oh, that's pretty, and just followed what you were doing. And then I was on my page, my business page, just scrolling down, and then your stuff came up and I was like, yeah, I remember this guy. And I was like, I should get him on the podcast at some point stage. And that was probably 2 weeks ago. And then you messaged and I was like, oh, he listens. This is cool. Let's do it, So this is a weird natural. It's cool that it's quite natural that I was following you, you were listening. It's anyways. But welcome, and I'm interested in this conversation. I've listened to your podcast with Joel. For those who don't know, look, there's this little guy. He's a bit of a.
He's a small man.
He's not even worth talking about, really. But Joel Barnett, he's been running a podcast called the Landscaping Podcast. I've been on his. He's been on mine. He's actually, from what I know, he's quite a nice guy. You know him personally. Is he a nice guy?
He is. We like to give each other a bunch of stick, and if you do listen to his podcasts, my name gets thrown around a lot. Most of the time, it's just Joel taking the mickey out of me. But all jokes aside, he's actually a genuine nice guy.
Well, do you know where a bunch of his jobs are? Like when he's doing different things? Do you know him that personally? Because if you do, you better not keep saying bad things about you, because you could go and just draw some glypho willies in his lawns or something like that. And he's installing.
When we did the block together in St Kilda, he had his ute parked out in the street, and I had to move mine because the parking inspectors just kept fining us left, right, and centre.
Oh wow! Yep.
Yeah. That was one thing that came out of the block, was the amount of parking fines I ended up with. But
in Melbourne.
Yeah, in St Kilda. Yeah. So
Oh yeah. That's the beach.
yeah. So when I was moving the car around and you'd see the install ute there, we'd always mess around with it a little bit, throw some Ashley James logos on it or something.
I've got a good parking story from Melbourne from 10 years ago, and in fact, I was talking about this with Nick from Lawns and Good Nick.
Mm.
So I don't know if it's come out yet. So I don't know if I'm spilling the beans, but he had the project coming over to his house, and we did this collaborative reel recently. So we were talking on the same day that the project was coming over to his house, and I was like, "Oh, I was on the project 10 years ago." Because anyway, Husey cracked a joke at me because 10 years ago, a little bit longer than 10 years ago, I was the support driver for a charity group that was cycling around Australia that I'd sail with my friends. And anyways, we had our car broken into, and Channel 10 came around, did an interview. I made myself look like a fool. Anyway, I should post that up. But anyway, so Husey had a crack at me, and it was good fun. Anyways, when the car got broken into, I was in a parking zone which we weren't allowed to park in school hours, right? But because the car got broken into, the police had to come along, so I didn't move the car. And then I got fined. It's like $160, right? 2 days earlier, I was in the city and I know nothing. And if you're from WA, you drive in the city, and you guys with your bloody hook turns and whatever rubbish you've got going on. And the number of people you have, that's like 2.5 times what Perth has. So it's like, it's such an annoying experience. And I parked and I couldn't find where to pay for my ticket. And I'm like, I'm doing something for 3 minutes. I'm going to risk it. $160 fine. So this is my second $160 fine I'd had in like 3 days. We're like, I was like 19. Like, this is a charity thing. I got no money. I'm like, oh my goodness, my second one. Anyways, the Channel 10 lady, I don't know if she's there anymore. Her name was Emma. I was talking to them and I was like, yeah, got 2 fines. And she's like, say no more. Channel 10 got me out of both fines.
Oh, how good's that?
I was like, that is so good. And anyways, so thanks, Channel 10. I'll take the joke. I was at my expense. But anyways, Melbourne, I don't know if I want to go back, to be honest. That's guy.
I'm on the outskirts. I'm in the Yarra Valley. So even for myself going into the city, trying to figure out hook turns, like what am I now, 34? And I think I've only just discovered how to do them myself. I used to just sit there with the indicator on and just get abused by the taxi drivers and just turn, because it took me a little while to get used to it as well. We've got one roundabout in my town, sorry. So it's it was a bit of a change going in the city even for me.
Yeah. Joe, we should talk about gardening stuff. What do you reckon?
There we go.
Well, let's start with this. First thing I wanted to say, and I told you this off here, but people go on Ashley's Instagram. It's Ash, right? Ashley.
Ashley.
What should I say?
Yeah. Ashley's fine.
Go on Ashley's Instagram, and the video quality of your reels. Like, there's a bunch of people out there who will do, they'll do a tour. Like, this is my garden. This is what I do, and it's like, oh yeah, cool. This is your garden. What you're doing is like, man, it's so pretty, and you've got, I don't know what you're doing, because this is not my skill set, but there's a level of quality and attention to detail, and it just it makes it look awesome. You're like cutting a bloody tomato and you make it look good. You're just moving a basket and it looks all right. And it's like, man, what do you do, right? Like, how are you getting them looking this good?
So I've got a few things. So I think probably the main thing there is I'm really fussy with what I do post. So I no longer post, and I used to post photos from my iPhone and all that kind of stuff. I no longer do that. I'll put them in my stories, but I won't put them in my feed. So I'm a big one on like attention to detail. So when it comes to the actual reels, I do a mixture where I'll put stuff up from my mobile phone if the lighting is right and I can film it right. Otherwise, I have photographers and videographers that we work with, and they're really good. They do a great job. And for argument's sake, I work with Jack from 33 Media. He does a lot of my videography for me, and he'll send me over a big splice of the whole video, and then I can splice it down into different sections, and then I'll put my music over it and make it sound the way that I want it to and feel the way I want it to.
Right, because I've done the same thing with a friend for Silverstone Gardening with Mother Mind Media.
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think I have as much. Well, he's given me, but he's taken a bunch of shots and he's given me stuff, and we've used it in advertising. But I don't do as many reels, and I don't think I have the, like, you're sort of telling a story with your reels, whereas mine's more just like, here's a shot of us doing work, and when Muller, who's a friend of mine, takes a shot, I'm like, I don't know, there's something about it where it's like, I wouldn't even think about doing that angle. I can't even, like, he just sees something and he shoots it, and then I get this file back. I'm like, that looks so good. I don't even know why it looks good. It just looks good. And I don't know how he does it. It's just magic to me, you know? So
I learned, and we spoke briefly off air about this, but I learned a very important lesson in business not long ago, and it's do what you do best and then outsource the rest.
yeah.
And I live by that now. That is just everything I live by. So yes, I can make some nice videos, and I've got a little bit of an eye for photography and stuff like that. But when you put my stuff up against the professionals, it's not there. In saying that, like, there's I think I have it pinned to the top of my Instagram page where it's just the gardener's garden. And I've got this beautiful sunset coming over the garden at my house. That's just filmed on my iPhone. And like that reel alone is something like 60,000 views. So you don't have to have a professional coming out every time. But I'm very fussy with the quality of work that we produce and that I post.
Well, what I like as well, we'll get into the technical side of actual what you do and work and all that sort of stuff. But what I love is when you look at like Instagram, it becomes this, same with the rest of the internet. It all becomes about like feeding the algorithm what it wants so that you get more and more likes and more and more likes and more and more likes. The problem with that is everybody starts looking the same because it used to be this time. I follow a couple of people who on the different accounts I've got who are like Instagram coaches, right? And I don't really follow what they're doing. I don't have the time. But I watch what they're doing, and they're like, you need to find trending sounds, or you need to have a 6-second reel. And it's like, okay, cool. Okay. But are you actually in this industry going to get the type of people who will actually get work? Because I'm not interested in 100,000 followers in Japan, right? Like, I only work in a very small geographical area in Perth. And so even if I'm getting people from Adelaide or Melbourne or whatever, whereas the approach, and I'm no Instagram expert by any stretch of the imagination, but from a marketing standpoint, it's, you know, for us to have successful businesses in this industry, you really only need, I mean, it depends on the size of your client, but somewhere between 10 large clients and maybe 120 small clients to keep one person sustained. And it depends on how often and frequency and the level of service and stuff. But I'm talking for a general rough guide. So why do you need 10,000 Instagram followers, you know, or like, and I'm not saying that to discredit anybody who has that, because there's different values, but chasing just vanity numbers and just chasing like, oh, I'm going to get 10,000 people, but they're all in South Korea and, you know, Uzbekistan. And do you know what I mean? Like
100% being, and I'm not, I'm going to say that I'm not saying this about myself because I don't want to give Joel ammunition to poke the bear any more than he does, but being famous on Instagram is like being rich in Monopoly. It's nothing. So I could have, like, I used to post a photo back in the day before I went to Reels, and I'd get maybe 3,500, 4,000 likes on that photo. But that doesn't mean that I'm getting 3,500 to 4,000 inquiries come through my business page.
Yeah.
Whereas now I can post a landscape photo and it might only get 300 to 400 likes on it, but I could get 2 to 3 job inquiries come from that, which could range from 75,000 to 300,000. So it depends what you want to be doing. Like, do you want to have a big Instagram following and be an Instagram influencer, or do you want to try and run a business and this is just a way of having a portfolio where you can showcase your work?
And that's what I'm getting at with your quality of video, is that you're not following the trends just to get likes. I actually think your stuff will convert. Your stuff, because it looks so schmick, will convert more people to the style of, because you only do high-end stuff. You're not doing that many jobs anymore. You're taking on more like, from what I understand, things have changed. You're taking on more like big projects and long-term maintenance plans and stuff. So that sells what you're trying to aim at. I love it, you know?
Yeah, and I went back to what you said before, like how, and it's nice to hear you say that because that's what we're trying to achieve. Is how you said it tells a story. Because the gardens that we produce and that we create, they're not your standard like cut and paste bulk gardens. Like everything that I do, it's like trying to create and tell a story so that as you journey through the garden, you go from one room to another and you have all these different seasonal interests and everything like that. And that's what I'm trying to achieve with the videos as well. And like you talk about trending audio. Well, like my stuff is so far from trending audio. The majority of the tunes that go over my gardens are like classical music from like the Beethoven era because it just matches with what I'm trying to do.
Yep. Mine is ASMR from me eating Zinger boxes, I think. So I don't even know. Like, I'm just, anyways. I should stop like talking about Instagram too much because, well, one, I don't know what I'm doing, but two, there's so much more interesting stuff. But to cap it off, you've got about 30,000 people, right? I mean, I checked before because I was like looking on. How much work do you get from that? Like for somebody who's out there, like to quantify what that really means for a business. And obviously it's different because you're a very mature business. You've been around for a long, long time. So there's other things that are probably like reputation, things like that, that maybe $30,000, 30,000. What was that?
You just call me old.
Well, I mean, old in the industry because you've been gone for we'll talk about that in a second. But what I mean is like 30,000 followers for someone who started 6 months ago because they gamed the system is probably not the same as 30,000 followers for someone who also has a decade plus of experience, right?
Yeah.
But
well,
how much does it mean for you?
Well, it's funny. So I think pre-going on the block, I had around pre-going on the block the first time, I think I had around 4,000 followers. And I probably back then, I probably used to get around maybe 30-40% of my work via Instagram. I think Facebook was a lot bigger back then. And then we did the block, and I think in like overnight we gained an extra 8,000 odd followers. And then that kind of over the reruns for the couple of weeks there, that went up a few thousand more. So that maybe put me on around 12 to 15,000 followers for argument's sake. And we had inquiries come from there. And then probably ran that for another 2 to 3 years. Then I reckon I was maybe up around the 90% of my work came via Instagram. Then COVID hit and I did my garden here, which was great for our following. It put my following through the roof, and that's where those extra, 15, 17,000 followers came from. However, that market that came in those last 15,000 followers were more of people looking for ideas and tips and tricks on what to do at their own house.
Yeah.
So it gained me a following, but it didn't necessarily gain me work leads. And then I went down a bit of a rabbit hole where I was posting more about my garden, and my wife actually gave me a kick up the bum, and she said, "You just kind of look like you're trying to be an Instagram garden guru as opposed to a business." So she gave me a bit of a kick up the bum to start posting more about the work that we're doing on our projects as opposed to what I'm doing in my garden. So now I'm trying to find that balance between the two. Because I reckon at the moment, I was sitting around 90-95% of my leads came via Instagram, and I reckon I'm probably back down to around 65-70% via Instagram.
But that's 65-70%. Is that enough to tick you over? Is that way more than you need? Is it like, I need to get more from other sources?
It's a good question, and it's a little bit hard to answer at the moment because the business has had another shuffle up and change in directions. So during COVID, I'm not sure what it was like over there, but during COVID here, our industry just went through the roof, and it was chaotic. Maintenance died in the arse big time, but landscape projects and landscape design, just you couldn't keep up with it. So I actually sat in the office for a solid 12 months there just designing gardens. I barely left my office. I was just busy designing flat out.
Right.
And now I've noticed that since the interest rates have gone up, that middle class market has slowed right down.
Yeah.
We've still got our 1%ers where, interest rates don't affect them and they'll spend no matter what.
Exactly.
But that middle class market is definitely, they're watching their pennies because cost of living is so expensive. So what I've noticed now is the design inquiries And I think it will change leading into the warmer weather. It always seems to boost up and bring people back to thinking about being outside. But in Melbourne in particular, like we get cold winters down here, especially where I am in the Yarra Valley. Like we get cold winters, and I love it. But people don't want to go out in their garden in winter. They'd rather sit inside with the fire and read a book or watch a bit of Netflix and just chill out. So, but what I've noticed is the design inquiries have slowed down a little bit. So for the last probably 5 to 6 months, I've been back out on site building all my designs, which was a big adjustment after sitting in an office for 12 months, then go back out on the tools was a big adjustment. And I had to get blisters and everything again to kind of get back to it. But I'm actually
Let's go back to being a real man.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So I'm actually, I'm really enjoying the direction that we're heading in now because I get a taste of both and I really enjoy that.
All right. You know, one of the craziest things that's ever happened in this podcast is the sheer amazing response people have had to the Lawn Shed sponsorship. It is crazy the number of businesses, considering the size of this podcast, the number of people who have signed up to a Lawn Shed Trade account, off the charts. Thank you so much for doing that. If you've done that, maybe you're sitting around going, I'm not quite sure exactly what's best for me to get right now. Here's exactly what I'm using from the Lawn Shed right now. 3 real quick things. The first is we're using a lot of Match Play Origin. It's a really good fertilizer for getting a pick-me-up. Not a great fertilizer if the lawn's already looking really schmicko, because if you put too much of it down, it might thatch up the lawn a bit. You might want to use a spring start or something else that's a little bit more slow release. But for lawns that are coming out of spring, maybe they're not the healthiest, you've got the weather on your side. You put down Match Play Origin, a patchy lawn will fill up really quickly. Just have a look at the sheer number of micronutrients. So you got macros like nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. A lot of fertilizers have that. Look at the micronutrients that are in there. The number of micronutrients in that, it just rivals just about any other product on the market. If you're currently getting your stuff from Bunnings, I don't think there's anything else. Not that I know everything that's in Bunnings across the entire country, but I don't know of anything else that I've ever seen that matches the sheer variety of nutrients that this is giving from a Bunnings thing. So if you're the sort of person getting stuff from Bunnings, fertilizer from Bunnings, this, in my opinion, is crapping all over that. All right. So then the second thing that I'm using is we're using Barricade to prevent weeds. And this little trick that we're doing is we apply that with some other products. You can apply it with liquid fertilizers. You do have to do a little jar test first to make sure they're compatible, but liquid fertilizers, wetting agents, seaweed, all that sort of stuff. We put them all together and you can do a little bit of a sale. Like, would you like fries with that sort of thing like Mactus does? Your burger is the Barricade application, the fries are the other things that you can put on. But that's something that we do a lot of this time of year. And then the final thing that we're doing is just a standard broadleaf post-emergent spray. You've got a lot of weeds like Burmetic or oxalis, clovers, things like that, just standard dandelions, things like that are making lawns look not so great. A bow and arrow is a fantastic product for the commercial operator. You don't use a lot of water. It's really it covers a broad range of weeds. Fantastic product to use. So that's what we're doing. Match Play Origin. We're doing a Barricade application with a lot of different things mixed in, and to make the most of the profits on that. And the final thing is a post-emergent spray. If you're getting those 3 things down in spring, you're going to be making a lot of extra money and getting a lot of return in terms of quality results. So what do you think is more important? Right, here's a technical question that I have an opinion, right? Probably offend some people, but what do you think is more important? Is it more important to have really good design, right, and rubbish maintenance, or would it be more important to have really rubbish design but really good maintenance for a gardener?
Yeah, okay. So you're actually talking. So the difference between me and not me and every other designer, but me and a lot of other designers is that I actually came from the ground up and I worked my way from the ground up. I didn't just go from school to university and do a degree in landscape architect or architecture or whatever. Like, I've actually come in as a horticultural apprentice. I've done my time. I've worked my way up into landscape construction, and then I've advanced through to garden design. So I actually think that you need both, because you can have...
Get off the fence. Get off the fence.
You can't
say that.
You can have a garden designer who can come up with the most amazing shapes and hardscape elements and everything like that. But if they don't know plants, then their design will never go anywhere and it'll look horrible. You might as well just get concrete and paint it green.
Yeah.
However, if you get a gardener with no design flair to just work on creating you a garden, the soil quality will be great, the plant health and all that kind of stuff will be amazing. But you could have a garden filled with like golden osmas and nandinas with yuccas in there because they might not have the right idea on, and I slag them off in every podcast, and I will not change that because they're just
yuccas. Or I'm surprised about the nandinas and the diosmas. Okay, diosmas are very hard to prune, and so I don't like having them in gardens. But
the odd nandina can float by, and I am known to use them on a couple of designs. But I just like yuccas are just the most horrible thing in the world.
They are, yeah, 100%. Everyone agrees on that. I don't even know why.
Yeah, I listened to your podcast with Chloe because she's just down the road in Hurstbridge. She's not too far from me, and I was quite happy when she said yuccas would be one of her ones to go. I thought, yeah, because we have a very different style, but I thought, yeah, no, it's good. At least we agree on that.
I think just about everybody agrees on that, right? I don't know. See, because there's a few things like, okay, so my mum's garden is filled with yuccas, and I keep trying to tell her to get rid of them, and they're massive, right? They've been in for 10, 12 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've offered to get rid of them, right? I'm not like she doesn't have to pay, right? But she's like, oh, I don't know why. She's the only person who I've talked to who's not like, oh, just get rid of them, rip them out. They're disgusting, you know?
Yeah.
In fact, I did a quote where I got the address wrong. There was one house. I think I was going to number 5, right?
Yeah.
And I drove past a house and it didn't have a number, and the next house had number 3. So I was like, this must be number 5. And I go and knock on the door, no one answers. I call the client. And I'm like, hey, I'm at the front of your house. They're like, no worries, I come out. Anyway, so I'm waiting for them to come out. This garden, I would say 15 yuccas in 35 square meters. I don't know why, right? Like, and I'm just thinking they must be asking me to rip them all out. I'm thinking, well, at least it's the front yard. We'll get the bobcat. And the guy calls me back. He's like, where are you? I'm like, I'm at the front. I was like, oh, I got it the wrong way around. It was 2 houses down, right? And I was like, praise the Lord. He has bucks hedges.
Ripping them out.
No. I was like,
started ripping them out. Yeah.
I was thinking, like, how do I get, like, this is not really a job for me. This is a job for a bobcat and like an excavation company. You know what I mean? Like, I can cut one out if you needed to. But anyway, I just was thinking, I was like, who came up with this idea of, like, think about, like, the very front verge. I've got to try and explain this to everybody. Front verge.
Came up with the idea of them, yeah?
No, but like of this specific garden. Do you know?
Yeah, no, not that garden in particular, but I honestly think I could trace it back. And I don't know him personally, so I don't want to throw him under the bus, but it's because of Jamie Jury. So we have a house in development out here.
Okay.
That came to life the same time as Backyard Blitz. And at the time of Backyard Blitz, it was the black mulch, the white pebbles, and the yuccas. And if you go through this house interstate through Doreen, just down the road from me, it's white pebbles, black mulch, yuccas. And it's only over the last 5 years people have started to remove them all. So, yeah, we have Backyard Blitz to thank for that one.
Did he do agaves too?
Probably, yeah. Yeah,
I mean, I can't remember the name of them, but I've talked about them before because there's like heaps of different agaves, right? But there's ones that sort of grow on the end of, they start off on the ground, but they sort of grow up like they have a trunk, and then they've got the growth on the end of them, and they are snail magnets, right? And then once the leaf gets eaten, it's done. You can't really just you got to get rid of the leaf. But they always plant next to the garden, and they lean out into the garden because they're chasing sunlight, and obviously lean out into the lawn because they're chasing the sunlight, and obviously they're planted next to a house. They're also some of the things that I hate the most. But back to this specific garden I was talking about, like, imagine probably an area that you could park 2 cars on side by side, and someone's just planted 3 rows of maybe 5 or 6 yuccas each or something like that.
Okay.
As if you would plant it like a hedge, or something like that. And they're probably as tall as me. Some of them probably, chest height. I was just like, who? What? Like, I just couldn't imagine who came up with that. It's obviously a homeowner's done it at some point, but what is the worst?
Joel Barnett was working in WA.
that's oh, poor Joe. I was gonna say Well, what is the worst thing you've ever come across going to someone's
Um,
house that you've had to deal with?
I had a client, it was probably when I was still trying to make my name and my reputation for my style. And I had a
Yeah.
client contact me. They were only 10 minutes down the road, so I went to look at it. And they wanted me to install fake turf, yuccas, black mulch, and white pebbles. And it was on a main road. And I just said, look, I'm sorry for wasting your time, but it's not for me. And he goes, well, I'm the client. That's what I want. And I said, I understand that, and I apologize for wasting your time. Here's a recommendation for someone who will do it, but I'm
Was it
not
Joel
going to.
Barnett?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I mean, people who don't haven't listened to our podcast, I think he's going to be the dodgiest guy in the ones ever
Yeah,
seen.
no, that's it. Yeah.
That's funny that he because we do that all the time. Because I would say 80% of our requests are for people who we can't help, right? Because they just want a once off, or they want a fortnightly cut, and that's it. And we just go, hey, look, we don't do that type of work, and they're like, oh yeah, no worries. I wonder, do you think it's because there's some clients that they can't be bothered asking for multiple quotes. They never tell you that, but they're just like, they're just too lazy to even organize that.
Quite open. I think another thing too was he told me I was the 5th person he'd have come out to look at it and give him a price.
Ooh,
really, you're going to go through 5 different quotes? Like, alarm bells are ringing.
Yeah, I had a lady call me up a couple of months ago, right? And she now. It's annoying. There's a turf farm that gives out my phone number on very weird and random occasions, right? We've had like an admin team for like 7 or 8 years, right? Like I don't answer the call. I don't know what the schedule is. I don't do anything. But like maybe 3 or 4 times a year, randomly I get calls from someone who's like, hey, the turf farm gave me a number. Do you lay lawn? And we don't even do it anymore. And this lady, she calls me up and so I answer the phone and she's like, hey, I'm chasing a quote. And she's like, oh, okay, you've got the phone number from the turf farm. No worries, we don't do the work anymore. She's like, oh, well, can you recommend somebody? I said, yeah, she said, everybody who I've contacted's got a massive wait time. And I was like, well, that's what the industry's like at the moment and blah, blah. And she's just like, oh, I just feel like everyone's trying to rip me off. And anyways, I go, oh, interesting. What sort of price are you getting charged? And I decided to be like an advocate for everybody else. And the prices she would charge, I thought were cheap. And I told her, and I was like, I think honestly, I don't mean to be really disrespectful. I'm saying everyone's got a budget, but if you're hiring somebody who's charging less than $100 an hour, you're probably hiring someone who's either very, very new in the industry or very, very desperate in the industry. And the reason is roughly a business should be charging roughly 3 times what they are paying their employees. And if you're paying somebody, $20-something an hour, they're in this market, they're, I don't need to say anymore. And so she understood it. And I was like, well, hopefully they changed her mind. She's going to call somebody else back up. But anyways, so yeah, you get people like that.
It is a hard one in this industry. I don't think this industry has the respect that it deserves. And I think because it is a low-level entry industry for certain aspects of the business, and after, it doesn't take much for a TV show to come on and kind of showcase landscape gardening, and people think I'm going to go and do that. That it kind of, there are people that just chase the cheapest rate, and you don't realize that with years of experience, comes a cost.
Well, this is why, coming back to my question, what's more important, good design or good maintenance? I'm on the maintenance side, right?
Yeah, but if you think a good design is expensive, you should see how expensive a bad design is, which is the old saying, because it's so true.
Oh yeah, well, I'm not talking about design, as in, sorry, I am talking about design. I'm not talking about price, right? What I'm saying is for the longevity of a garden, because what people do, right, is if you stuff up a really bad design, at least a good maintenance, so the homeowner does it themselves, and it's just they screw everything up, right? Yeah. Somebody who knows how to solve their problems can at least keep their garden alive. But what I find happens is people have this intensity over consistency mindset where they're like, I'm going to spend a lot of money to fix this problem and then I won't have to worry about it again. And then we get called 2 years later because they spent a lot of money designing the garden, and then they just let it go, right? And they didn't do the maintenance. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, you can't fix it once. And so, I mean, it comes across, why we defend people is comes across as they're like, you're poo-pooing the design side, right? And there's construction as well. I've missed that, because you could have a good design from a great designer, and then a construction guy cuts corners on it, right? But I'm talking
there's only so much from a maintenance point of view. Like, if your install team has just planted in heavy clay and done nothing to actually fix an issue, then what do you do with a maintenance point of view? You've got to pop everything out, redo it all, and then it's another install.
Yeah. What's clay?
What's sand?
Yeah, I'm going to show you. I'm going to put a story up, actually. You know, I'll do it straight after this. I was fixing sprinklers today, and obviously, wetting everything, and we had this massive puddle of it was just like, it looked like playground sand. Oh man, it was. And I was like highlighting how hydrophobic the soil is. But yeah, and I guess hearing you say that as well does click into my mind, where I'm like, there's some problems that you guys probably have that we don't have, because you can plant into sand and you can resurrect it with wetting agents and fertilizers, and you can add organic matter to the sand and improve it over time. But you're right, with clay,
with us down here, if you don't, and drainage, people are always the first one to scrap drainage because they think, do I really need to spend $5,000 on drainage? If you don't put drainage in and you install a $200,000 landscape, you're going to do so much damage to that landscape coming back through to install the drainage at a later date. And down here, we need to worry about drainage.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Okay, here we go. This shows my inexperience in what you guys do, because I've never thought about drainage, right? I mean, everything just goes through the sand, so that's fine, right? That's interesting. So I guess, I mean, you are right in the answer, and it's an interesting thought experiment, which is why I don't like the sitting on the fence, right? Even though we know the sitting on the fence is probably the correct thing, because you would have design, and then you have construction, and then you have the maintenance side. But I sort of feel like a really good garden maintenance crew, and that's why I was asking you, is you sort of got a foot in everything, and so you sort of, there isn't a bias like I would have, because I don't touch the other two. But a really good maintenance guy could maybe fix some mistakes,
Yeah, but and I think it probably again comes down to the different areas of the country too, because like, you're a completely different country over there compared to what we're dealing with here. Because like I said, the drainage is the biggest one, and if the install team doesn't do that, then the maintenance team, how do you fix that without damaging everything?
Yeah, true. And Far North Queensland, Darwin's a different world as well. Like,
absolutely. So I think you've got to have
completely different types of places.
Yeah, I think you got to have a mixture of all three. One of my favorite garden designers is Miles Baldwin. Do you know Miles?
Yeah, I don't. I learnt of him through Craig from Southern Cross Gardens and Nick Frame, because he designed one of their gardens.
Yeah, and
I'll ask him to come on one day.
Yeah, Craig maintained it for a while. I remember watching all his photos he put up. It was beautiful. So Miles is one of my favorite garden designers, and I think the reason why I like Miles so much is because Miles is a gardener. So he came from, and he's a real gardener. Like, he's a traditional gardener where he came from the ground up, and he worked through the botanical gardens, and his plant knowledge and his horticultural expertise is better than anyone, and it really shows in his gardens.
What do you, so with him and with yourself, how important is having just years under the belt compared to the book knowledge?
Good question. So when it comes to plant names, for argument's sake, my Latin is absolutely shocking, which is your book knowledge side of things. But if I go to a nursery, I can look at pretty much any plant and know how it's going to work, how to prune it, when to prune it. So that I don't know. There's a side. I don't want to be on the fence again, but there's a side there for that argument too, because I think you need to have hands-on experience, because I can write on a whiteboard, this is a spade and this is how you dig a hole, but then if I give you a spade and tell you to dig me a hole, well, do you know how to do it, type thing. So you've got to have a bit of both there as well.
I hope you would know how to dig a hole. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I think my kids are doing that when I came home. Like they got a
That's
sand
it.
pit. Like that's a pretty natural. Like we worked that out. My
In
dog does
saying that, but like we both laugh about that, and I can remember 3 different incidents where I've walked around the corner and someone's digging a hole with a square mouth, and they are going at snail's pace, and I look at them and go, really, like. Shovel, spade. This is another argument too. Actually, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this because I don't know if it's just a Victorian thing, but I was told that the difference between a shovel and a spade is a spade you dig with, and a shovel you shovel with.
Yep.
So if you're digging a hole, then you get a spade. But then I've also learned, depending on what you call a tool, is whether or not you're a landscaper or a gardener, because landscapers will just call everything a shovel. Whereas a gardener will spade.
No, yeah, they're not all shovels.
That's it. Yeah.
No way.
I explain that to a landscaper.
I was going to say what you call a tool is probably Joel Barnett. No, I'm throwing it under the bus. Poor Joel.
I've been waiting a while, but he's getting his revenge, which is good.
He's got 130 something episodes, or 140 maybe now, where he can throw.
But what I love is Joel listens to podcasts like non-stop, so I know he's going to listen to this. He's going to cop an insult every 5 minutes. It's great.
Let's not tell him. Neither of us will tell him. We'll just wait. We'll just wait for the message to come, screenshot it and share it to our stories.
Yeah.
No, they're definitely different. And the only two. Okay, here's the debate: long-handled or short-handled. Right, we can talk about it in a second. But here's my thoughts: a rounded shovel is one of the most useless things, and a trenching shovel is one of the most useless things. All you need, in my opinion, is a nice big square mouth shovel for when you're spreading sand. It's nice soft pile of sand that's been delivered on the front, yard. You got to get in your wheelbarrow. That's for that. And then you need a spade that is for digging, something out of the ground. That's all you need, right? Do you agree with me?
Pretty much, but I would use a long handle spade. I use that for when I'm shoveling up the wheelbarrow. And then I have border spades, which I use in between the garden beds because my plantings are so dense.
Oh, the little skinny ones?
Yeah, so just like a short handle spade. I use that in the borders for planting.
Yep, okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense, because the other thing about a spade, you guys do a lot of planting. We don't do a lot of planting. A normal spade's too fat for some applications.
Yeah.
But for me, a trenching shovel with the big sides, I don't understand it, because if you're digging a trench that's already in sand, or okay, maybe this is the sand, maybe it's a clay thing. I don't know. You tell me.
But it might just be the sand thing because it just collapses over there. Whereas here we can dig it with a trenching shovel. We can dig a perfect trench with that.
That's it. Okay, that's the difference, right? Because for speed's sake, if I'm cutting a trench, let's say I got to add a sprinkler, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to cut a trench. I'm using a nice sharp spade to cut nice squares of the lawn out and then place them to the side so I can relay that lawn back down again. You can't do that with a trenching shovel.
I would still do the same with that, yeah.
So, but what I'm getting at is you've already cut out the lawn at the width of the shovel.
Yeah.
Or the spade, Now I'm mixing them up. I told you people don't do that, but now I'm doing it myself. But at the width of the spade, you've cut it out and then you place it to the side. You may as well dig it at that width anyway. And then, yeah, if you do a trenching, it just collapses and you got to keep digging. I actually think you do more or just as much sand removal with a trenching shovel here in WA as you do with a normal spade. Just use a spade.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, clay. See, this is the thing about this podcast. Like, I started the podcast because there was all these. I was sick of getting American advice and European advice, and it was all useless. And I just stumbled my way through many years of my business and garden stuff and all that jazz, because it's just it's just so unique. And even here I'm like giving advice that I realize after you speak for about 3 seconds is pretty useless for you guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends. It's like you said, you've got you guys, you've got us, and then you've got Queensland as well, like tropical Queensland. That's completely different. Like my wife would move to Port Douglas in a heartbeat if I said yes, but I'd have to change careers because I don't know a single thing about tropical plants or trying to make that look good.
Yeah,
Got no
that's
idea.
actually good. That's actually quite true. I think you can get away with it. So with lawns, you can get away with it, right?
Yeah.
It's so much easier to teach people about lawns because yeah, they're all quite similar. As soon as you get into plants, you got thousands and thousands and thousands of different varieties and
Oh yeah, absolutely.
microclimates
And I've
affect
got what I
things.
like and what works for me. So today, for argument's sake, I'm excuse me, I'm doing a garden rejuvenation revamp on a wedding reception in the Yarra Valley. And there's the original Potter's quarters there, which is this beautiful old cottage where I'm doing my style. So I've got my salvias and I've got some traditional cottage plants going in there.
Yep.
And then there's a native billabong out the other side of the property where we've got to plant natives around it. I was in and out in 5 minutes with the cottage. I just bang, yep, loaded up 2 trolleys, done. The native, I was probably there for 45 minutes walking around scratching my head going, I've got no idea what to do here. Or, yeah, and I figured it out, so it will look nice, but it's not my style. So it's another learning.
Yep. I mean, so I've been a little bit background stuff. I've been making these garden packages. We do garden packages, but I wanted to make a better way of planning around them, and I wanted to be like, because some of the problems we've had is you look at a garden and you go, okay, this needs this needs that, this needs that, and then you got to have some time for just random stuff that comes up. So maybe start getting some bugs you got to treat, or maybe the park across the road has a lot of trees that are deciduous and you didn't think about that, which means you got to spend a lot of time cleaning them up and things like that. So I was like, oh, how do I collect these things better? And could I make a list of like all the requirements of all the most common plants that we get? And I start making this list sort of in my head, and it's like, okay, yeah, hedges, okay, lily pillies need this and this needs that. And you start going down the list, it's like, there are so many plants. I went on Banara's website, which is like the biggest they're the biggest wholesale nursery in the country, and they're based here in WA.
Yeah.
And they've got like 2,600 plants they sell.
Yeah.
Right. And I go there and I go to their indoor section, right? And they are missing so many things compared to, like, there's a guy who does specialist indoor stuff not down the road, like half an hour away from them. But what I'm getting at is they have so many varieties of plants, but they're only really selling what's really, really commercially, good to go.
Yeah.
I'm like, how can you possibly make a formula for every single plant with every single climate? You just can't. And then you just go down the path of, well, then how helpful is the book knowledge? Because it might have been written from somebody who was in northern Queensland. It doesn't.
Well, that's true. Yeah, and it comes down to the area that you're in and what works and grows there. Because if I try and take some of the stuff from North Queensland and grow it, not that I would, and grow it down here. So, and again, I don't have it anymore because I've built a name and I've built a style and a reputation of that style. But when I first went out on my own, I'd have clients call me up and go, "Oh, I want a tropical garden."
Yeah.
Why? Oh, because we've just been to Bali for 3 months and we loved it. It's great in Bali, but you live in the Yarra Valley and we get this thing called frost here, and it's not going to work. Like, it's just, you might get a 70, 80% success rate, but that, 20 to 30% that does get knocked on the head, it just takes away from it. It's just, to me, it's like, you've got to work with your area and work with your environment.
Do you know what annoys me is now you're saying, no. Oh, poor Joel. No, he doesn't actually. He's quite a nice guy. No, that's not the brand of the. No, yeah, he annoys me. He's a horrible human being. No, what annoys me is when people plant natives next to tropical things, right? And they pretend they're being water wise, and you're like,
okay.
They're on the same zone. They're on the same sprinkler zone, Yeah. Or you've got your kikuyu lawn, right? Which is fairly drought tolerant, whatever, but you've got your kikuyu lawn and your sprinkler goes into your garden bed. You're already watering it to support the kikuyu. And you go, I'll put some natives in to be water wise. You could put pretty much anything in. If you're already watering. At least 60% of all plants that have ever existed will survive on the same amount of water that your lawn will. You know what I mean?
And like I've seen the quality of the lawns that you guys are producing too. Like, you know, that's not just a lay turf and then forget about it. Like that's an ongoing, which is obviously what you guys do, an ongoing maintenance package which requires watering. So
yeah, all that stuff. And so I was thinking about the tropical stuff because you people start and I talked about this. I think it might have been with Joel actually in the very nice podcast with a very nice man. I feel like I have to now. Speak nicely. I feel so sorry for him.
I'm actually friends with him. We're going out for dinner shortly, actually. So just for the record, he is a good guy.
Well, I've only talked to him on the phone a couple of times, so maybe that's why I can't be so brutal. But I definitely would be in person. He was saying that a lot of the I like tropical gardens over here, but I feel like because you had to put a lot of work into it, I realized people who have to put a lot of work into it to make it work probably did a lot of soil prep and they actually made things, that they did preparation. Whereas the native gardens here become just like, it's just some homeowner who's thrown some things in the backyard. They weren't designed by anybody. Whereas when somebody wanted tropical, they realized they had to go get somebody who actually knew what they were doing. Right. Yeah. So maybe, there's a few things like that, but we get it all the time where someone's got, just a plant that is just, what are you doing? I had somebody plant a polygala in the middle of their lawn, and their lawn, the section of the lawn is like maybe 8 meters by 8 meters. And they've put this tiny little polygala in the middle. And I'm like, why? What are you like? Do you know how big that's going to get? Like, it looks small now. And how much maintenance are you going to have to pay me to? Yeah. So what were you saying?
It's just a cute little feature to put in the middle of the lawn. Make your life harder.
Exactly. And then they had, what was even worse is they somehow attached one of those little spaghetti sprinkler like lines with a dripper to it. Right. The middle of the lawn was already being watered.
Yeah.
And of course I start whippersnipping. And I'm trying to now like lower my revs not to break the spaghetti line.
Yeah.
Which doesn't even need to be there.
Yeah.
I'm having a rant at you now anyway.
Get it off your chest, mate.
Yeah. Are you okay? No. Somebody put a spaghetti. This is like a guidance therapy. Someone put a native in a sprinkler zone, pretending they're saving water.
Yeah.
Okay, one thing.
It's so hard. Like, I look at WA and I'm just like, to me, it'd be such a, in general, like it would be a struggle unless I was on site to kind of figure it out. One of my favorite designers, Bonnie Stacey, she's based over in WA and she does amazing work and she uses a lot of the plants that I use as well. So, there's hope for me yet. And I've had 3 design inquiries come over from Perth actually. So there is a chance we might be heading over there to look at doing some kitchen gardens over there. So
yeah, that was the next thing I was going to ask you about. But Bonnie Stacey, I actually recorded a podcast with her that was so bad I didn't release it.
I heard you say this. Yeah, like bad quality. Bad quality.
It was like a 6-second delay. It would be like she would talk, and we're in the same state. I don't know why. Anyways, it was disappointing because I wanted to. We had done some preparation, and I'd be like, "Hey, this is the question I want to talk about. I want to go through design stuff and really talk to you about how you go about things because I'm so clueless." And start talking. It was like talk. I can see her mouth moving, and now the sound comes through, and then I would talk
like an old kung fu movie.
And then now the sound comes through, and it was like I was like, oh, maybe we can record, and I'll fix it in the edit. And I got about like 45 seconds in. You just can't do it. Anyway, but yeah, her style is so different to yours as well because she's super coastal.
Yeah, there's some plants. Well, in saying that, but like I think Bonnie's very clever because the way that she's done her ebooks, like she has cottage style gardens on there. She has different style gardens and different styles of those gardens for the different climates from around the country. So she's very clever, Bonnie. And then teamed up with her husband John, who does the install with Bruce Landscapes. Like it's a very good little system they've got going on over there.
Yeah, they've monopolized everything there. They just need to have their children grow up older so they can do all the maintenance side after.
That's it.
Yeah. Did you know that about her that I didn't know until I recorded the start of a very bad podcast? Was that she's a landscape designer. I think her sister is an interior designer, and I think she said her brother is an architect. It's something like that.
Right.
Or her
Yeah,
dad's
yeah,
an architect or something, and they all
yeah,
went into some form of design. So I was like, man, you
yeah,
could all like
crazy.
team up, do everything,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. It's obviously in the blood over there. Yeah, they could offer like a one-stop shop, couldn't they?
Yeah. I wonder if that would get like too much. Do you know what I mean? Like working with a spouse or a close friend just gets too.
I did my apprenticeship with my father. I worked for my father for probably 12 years before I went out on my own.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so with him, no dramas, and then it was when my brothers started coming into the business that we started to clash.
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah,
see, there you go. See, because
yeah,
I think with your father, there's that dynamic where he's the boss, and then it's his business,
correct.
and then your brothers come in, and then it's sort of like, who's the boss, you know?
Yeah,
Or I'm not taking anything from you. You're my brother, you know?
exactly, and that's what it was, and it was, yeah. I'll stay professional and tell what happened, but yeah, it was the big clash there, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's a shame as well. My brother works for me,
Oh,
but
really?
he's also, yeah, but he's at university, so he only does casual laboring stuff. And he's funny because he's a musician, right? And
Yeah,
he's studying music, so he's so far from gardening that
yeah,
it's like um, he has no technical knowledge, he has no interest in the industry, but he doesn't mind getting out, you know, and jumping a whippy, and yeah, it's probably a nice break for him in terms of the style of work, fits in with his uni. That's fine.
I find whippy so weird when you guys say whippy. I've never heard that until I listened to the podcast. And I was like, oh,
What do you
sounds
call it?
a brush cutter.
Okay, so you go to Bunnings and you buy what type of brush that you cut it with? Like,
I'd never buy a brush cutter from Bunnings.
no, but what I'm saying is you've already got your whippy,
Yep.
right? You cut plants and lawns and things with, you don't cut brushes. Like you don't get a paintbrush, stick it in the ground, cut it with your whipper snipper.
Is it
No one
potato
calls
cake
it
or
brush.
potato scallop?
It's a hash brown, isn't that what it is?
Okay.
I'm trying to be neutral, but it's a completely different thing.
I was gonna say, if you said scallop, I was going to say that's the end of this interview. Thanks for having me on.
To be honest, I don't even know because that wasn't
They don't
something
sell
my
them at
mum
KFC, so,
ever cooked.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't sell at KFC or the local kebab shops. I've got no idea. You know, is that a Coles? Like,
Hey, going back to your business quickly, I'm gonna turn this around and interview you quickly because I listened to your podcast and there's questions there which I'm curious to know. How big is your company?
Okay, that's a good question. We just changed everything up. So over the last 6 months, the biggest we got to was we had about 13 employees at the biggest.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so here's some vanity numbers for you. And you know all about this because I've listened to your podcast with the very honourable Sir Lord Joel Barnett. So we there was a year that we did like 1,600 clients we served in a year.
Yep.
Bunch of people, thousands of phone calls, doing all that sort of stuff. We were trying to go down the path at the time. This is probably 2021, something like that. We're trying to go down the path of upper middle class, targeting that. So you still have the economies of scale, but people who have a big enough budget. And there is a market for that in Perth, which is FIFO workers. So we weren't doing complete packages back then. We were happy to take on monthly mowing, happy to take on fortnightly mowing, you know, gardening every 6 to 8 weeks if it's just, you know, a native garden that needs it, you know, like as long as you're a good payer, good client, we're happy to take that on. And then hire people. This was a strategy. Hire people who were pretty good, even who had no experience but were interested, and you could train them up. We had all the vanity numbers. We didn't have the profit margins, right? And we were aiming to average $88 an hour over the fortnight. So including all travel time, equipment maintenance, go to the shops, everything. So our time on site were over $100 an hour, right? And we were getting like the results from the clients were happy, but we just couldn't find that level of staff. So then 2021, sorry, we were like, let's downsize a little bit. So we moved on some of our lower end clients. We had some big commercial clients, and we'll increase our hourly rate. We'll hire slightly better people if we can. And we hired a guy, a fantastic guy, former golf course superintendent. And this is when we started focusing more on this sort of stuff. So then we probably had about 9 employees at that stage. That guy, he ended up getting a, how do I put this nicely? Oh, not nicely, succinctly. It's nice. I wasn't trying. He got an injury. I wasn't trying to insult him, but he got a injury. Was on workers' comp, and the long story short was that it was supposed to be a 12-week injury, and then it was like, oh, at the end of 12 weeks, oh, he's not quite better. Come back in 2 to 4 weeks, and every 2 to 4 weeks, it was come back another 2 to 4 weeks, and so we never felt like we could replace him. That was April of 2022.
Yep.
He's still on workers' compensation. So it's like coming up to a year and a half.
Yeah.
He still technically works for us, but back in March, it was said with the doctor, we saw it coming by February, but late January, we started trying to replace him because it was just a fantastic guy, man. It was one of the things, like, if he sucked, we would have just replaced him, but we just kept trying to hold on to him. So we made the decision in March. We had the craziest week. I've never talked about this on the podcast before, so good question.
Thank you.
We had the craziest week where the guy that we were supposed to replace him with, 20 years experience in the industry, worked at Kings Park, worked at race courses, so he had gardening knowledge. He had a 4-year apprenticeship, like proper one, really good on paper. 3 weeks in, he comes to me. Actually, no, I have a meeting with him on a Monday. How are you going? And I send something to right. So I'm really asking him some honest questions. Right. It's too physical for him. He's in his 40s now. And he didn't want to tell me, but I really got it out of him. Next morning, I wake up to a bunch of messages. His wife has been rushed to hospital with suspected heart attack. I'm like, okay, interesting. He's going to quit. Right. Don't think about yourself. This guy's had a heart attack, but he didn't say, but I just knew from the conversation and the situation, he's feeling overworked because he's come last sort of 5 years. He's had, light maintenance jobs, and we do a lot of working, and it's hot. And so that happens. Anyways, I know in the back of my head, this other guy, the main guy, he's not going to last long. We have a lot of admin. We've taken us forever to find, how hard it is to find good staff. We've had this job up for a month. We're not going to be able to replace this guy. So I'm doing the maths in my head. I know this guy's going to quit. 99% sure. Sure enough, 10:30, he calls me. He goes, man, she turned out to be okay as far as I'm aware now. But it was a bit of a scare. And he just goes, I've got to get a job that's, less physical for me. I said, no worries. Totally understand your decision. You got to make the best decision for yourself. That put me in a position that I got to make a decision. Am I going to try and rush and hire someone to replace now 2 people? Because I know this guy's, or do we just completely downsize? And my health was starting to get better at this stage. So I called up the admin and I said, you girls, you know the situation we're in. You got 2 decisions. You can take a pay cut down to 30% of your current hours and current wage. So the same hourly rate, but we can only afford 30%, right? Or you can take a redundancy. You don't deserve this. It's got nothing to do with you. We just don't have the staff. We're not going to be able to find the staff because we've been losing money. Here's a concept for people very briefly. If you have a business that has 10 employees and you make 10% profit margin, you lose 1 employee, you've lost all your profit margin in a sense, because that's 10% of all the work you're doing is done. That was our problem. We were running down on people. And so we're like, we have to downgrade our, non-billables and all that sort of stuff. So we said it to our admin staff. And I was like, I'll take on more admin work to cover things. That's your options. Both of them came back and said, we'll take the redundancy, which I thought they would. And that was a shame because they're both fantastic. So we lost 3 people in 2 days. While this was going on, 2 weeks earlier, I had a conversation with the casual guy, and he was getting 4 or 5 days a week. He's like, oh, coming into winter, how much work am I going to get? Well, I said, probably 3 or 4 days. And he goes, I think I sort of need 5. And I try and have these open, honest conversations with people because I'm like, you can do what's best for you. Just keep me in the loop, right?
Yep.
Like, I don't want someone pulling the pin out of me. And I was like, if somebody offers you a better job, come talk to me. You know, like this guy had kids, right? So I'm not going to argue with him about money. He's got to pay bills, right? He doesn't know anything else. He's been off work. He calls me up. He's like, I've just been offered a job, $10 an hour more, right? And I was like, I didn't tell him. You have my blessing. You can go, you know? So I was like, interesting. Okay, maybe that's a bit of a God thing. I'm a Christian, so I think that way. So, but anyway, so I think, okay, interesting. I've lost 4 people in now 2 days. We go have a team meeting the next day. Team meeting the next day. Straight after the team meeting, the Doug, who was the gardener who was working for us, when the injury goes to the doctor and the doctor says you have to quit. Well, not you have to quit. You have to leave the industry. You can't do it anymore. And then after all that craziness, so 5 people in 3 days, one of our other team members go, this is too crazy. I'm going somewhere else. I was like, totally understand. But we went from 9 employees to 3 employees in 5 business days, right? Craziest week I've ever had in business.
And this is recent.
That was in March. You know, that was 4 weeks before I started the podcast. I was already putting into work the things to do the podcast. Like, you know, I'd already messaged Ben Sims. He knew that was happening. I'd had the logo. I'd done this and that. And I was like, I'm going to still do the podcast, right? And I've been basically working till 11 o'clock basically every night ever since. Not really. It's like, but
so you're now back on the tools too, because I listened to your podcast, and again, I've heard in previous episodes that you had an injury come through and you had to get off the tools. So I think it must have been with your business coach, and that's why you're trying to scale up so that you could get off the tools and step backwards. But it sounds like you're now back on the tools. Is that right?
Yes. So I have an autoimmune disease called ankylosing spondylitis, or AS for short. And I went from being on the tools, and I love being on the tools. I love working outside, and I couldn't do the work anymore. At my absolute worst, and this wasn't like on a daily basis, but every day I had problems, and it fluctuates because of autoimmune. But my absolute worst, I couldn't drive a car with a clutch for very far because it was too painful to push the clutch in. I couldn't sit down in proper chairs for about. There were seasons where I didn't leave the house except to go to Coles, not KFC, but to go to Coles or to go to the warehouse. That's all I would do. I would like for weeks, you know, because that's how bad my health was. I don't really talk about this too much because, anyways, yeah, you've asked. But so I was really bad at my absolute worst. I did about 20 paid hours worth of work in 2.5 years. So on the tools, and I would say 12 of those 20 hours were on a Kanga. So I was just standing up driving a machine, and I might have done a little bit of like, oh, I'm at a job, I'll edge while I'm here. Like everyone's verti mowing, I'll jump on the whippy or whatever. And then the other bunch of the time is I helped out with rose pruning, and I used some battery rose pruners because even my hands I had problems. And I started getting better, and I started getting better about exactly a year ago. So I'd had 6 months of improvement, and I had my first solo day back on the tools February this year. And so this all happened this happened in March. And in the back of my head, I was like, I think I can do a day a week. I think I can do 2 days a week. It's coming into winter. I'll focus on my health as much as possible. We'll see how we go in spring. And I've done 23,000 steps today or something like that. So my health is insanely good compared to where it was before. And
amazing.
It's I mean, so that's my story. But the business side of it, the 2 mistakes that we made, not mistakes, but the first thing is you don't want to grow too quick. But I was forced to grow quickly because if you're doing, let's go back to 10% profit margin. Because it's nice, easy round numbers. But if you want a 10% profit margin and you want to earn $100,000 a year, you need to do $1 million a year worth of work, right? That's just how it is. So that's what the strategy essentially was. Get into the millions so that, and that's why we're going for the upper middle class market, because there was enough work there to sustain that. Yeah. And then this next strategy was, let's go a little bit lower so we don't have as many bad staff to deal with. but high profit margin. And then now it's like, I have a bunch of work. I don't have enough staff.
Yeah.
We were so brutal, and we just said to everybody, you're getting massive pay rises. No, as in the clients, you're going to have to pay way, way more. We don't have the staff. We're not looking for them. If you like the people that we still have, and we were very respectful about it. We helped people find, but we went from doing crazy amounts of requests to we just have a very small, we kept our absolute cream of the crop. And I just work at my own pace now. And yeah, so that's thanks for coming to my show and tell, everybody.
Well, I listened, like I said, I actually listened to the podcast, so I'm just curious because I've got a follow-up question here too. And that is because you're talking numbers. And I hear you say that you charging that $100 an hour mark. My question is, are your clients 8-hour clients, or are they 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour?
Okay. My average job size, I would say, is 45 minutes.
Okay.
Right. And that would be because of the packages. Our average mow size would be about 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I also think that because of that, we have a huge amount of travel time. Right. Mm-hmm. It's common to do 15 jobs in a day or something like that. So what we do, this is why with my podcast, one of the earlier episodes is this is how you can work out what you should charge. And I don't recommend people just copy what we charge, because there's a lot of things we do about it. But I mention the numbers that we charge because I think people put a ceiling on what they think they can earn in the industry. And then they go, oh, you couldn't earn this. And we come in and we go, all things said and done, over the course of a year, our packages should be earning us at least $130 an hour, at least, right? Some will be way more. So people go, no way, I can't believe it. It's like, yeah, it's possible. It's true. It's what happens. So.
But the reason why I asked that, because when I used to have the maintenance division of my company, back when I had staff, I wouldn't do, from a maintenance point of view, I wouldn't do anything that was less than half a day. And then after that, I got rid of that, and I wouldn't do clients that were anything less than a day, because we would lose too much time in the guys traveling around, and they'd have their downtime to travel from job to job, because we're in a semi-rural area. So by the time they would come to the yard, load up, head out, they'd stop at the shop, they'd grab a coffee and a donut, then they'd get to the job, and then they'd, do whatever, pack up, shoot through, stop at the servo, grab a Gatorade, go to the next job. Yes. My downtime, it wasn't there. So then I went, okay, well, I'm not taking on anything less than half a day with 2 guys, because at that time we were running a maintenance crew of 2. And then I found that wasn't working either. So then I went, okay, well, that's it. We're doing 8 hours of 8 hours minimum, crew of 2. But even now, I could not charge $100 an hour. So say $220 for 2 guys per hour. I could not charge that on the big acreage jobs out here, because you will still get someone out here that will come and do it for not even that, $50 an hour. And I saw on a Facebook post before I came on this podcast that there was a lady arguing with a client over gardening in the Yarra Valley over $30 an hour. And I thought, $30 an hour, like, really, like, and that's obviously not a professional system and a professional setup, but it's just such a hard market to crack from a money point of view. The maintenance, it's really, really tricky.
It is incredibly difficult. So here's 2 things that are going on that I noticed. The first is we have a massive advantage over you in 2 ways. So it's not your fault that this is difficult, or anybody else who's listening to this. The first is we have mining, right? Mining money, right?
Yeah.
Now, so do other places, right? So it's not like, we're the only people who have it. But we have mining money, and we target small blocks. So people who go out rural, they might have the same, like some of your clients might have a very similar amount of income as some of my clients, but you've got 17 times more land to manage. So they look at my invoice and they go, our average client is, let's say it's around $300 a month.
Yeah.
Is what they pay, right? We might only be there for 2 hours. They do not care. They're at work, right? But we're doing things like aeration, weed control. We're organizing all their fertilizers, all their products, all that sort of stuff. And I think you are too as well. But like what I'm getting at for those, I'm now talking also to the people listening, is that because it's so complicated and there's a lot of moving parts, they appreciate the administrative effort and the organization and timing everything right. And they don't see it in the same light where they're chasing how many dollars, or how many minutes, as long as it falls within budget. So there's that side of it. The downside is, here's a crazy number for you, right? Before everything happened in March, for every hour of gardening work we were paying our staff, we were paying 21 minutes of administration time. It's like insane. And so it was an incredibly expensive business model, because our number one goal was to have the absolute best, easiest to organize service. And that's why our clients gave us such good ratings. But that's also why the first thing that had to go was our admin had to drop down drastically. And so when you do this many services, it's like there's goods and bads with everything. I can totally see how your strategy is a real smart one, because you're dealing with one client for 2 full people for a day. We would deal for 2 full people for a day. Here's an example. I worked with Elliot the other day. We did 54 different services, not at 54 properties. It might have been at 4 different properties. We might have done 11 or 12 services each. No, sorry. Other way around. Sorry. 12 properties, we did about 4 or 5 services each, right? Where we're aerating, checking the sprinklers, fertilizing, this and that, whatever. That's just huge admin to organize and everything. So I'm not trying to, the way we do it is a way that works, but you have to have the right things going for you, which is, good marketing, enough people coming in, tight, dense, organization. Yeah.
And do you guys run service, mate? Is it not service autopilot?
Yeah, we run service autopilot. Yeah, so that does everything there. Yeah. Have I talked about that in the podcast before? Have I?
I listen, and I know the Lawn Care Millionaire. I know my stuff.
Oh yes. So service autopilot. It's a real shame. When Lawn Care Millionaire was doing it, awesome. He sold half of it, I think, in 2019.
Oh, really?
It's gone downhill since then. I think we're one of the only Australian businesses using it, and it's one of the things is that we are so set up for that system that it's just too, like, we're addicts. It's like we're too far deep. We can't not use it. So but it was the bee's knees 5 years ago. And I saw everything else. It was like what it did. It was a bit clunky, a bit hard to use. What it did was fantastic. These days, it's very similar. It's still really clunky. They don't support Australian people because they don't have enough market. Okay.
It's
a shame.
Because I do, and I still say it to people. I will have maintenance guys message me on Instagram, and they will be asking questions about what to do and how to go about it. And I still recommend Jonathan Potoshnik, I think his name is. I still recommend his YouTube channel, Lawn Care Millionaire, as a really good place to start. And I say that although it's an American market, his business model and mindset is worth its weight in gold. He's a very clever man.
Yeah, and I listened to a bunch of his stuff when I first started. Like his business number stuff, and this is what you can get from the American side, is the business side of it is very good. Actual maintenance side of it, or like how to actually do the grass side or the lawn side of the garden side, is hit and miss because it's all climate stuff. So, but you've got a similar story in that you've also had a bunch of staff at a similar time, and then now you've sort of cut down. My goal is we're going to rebuild. We're trying out some things that I won't say on air. I can talk to you after, but we're trying some things. The ultimate goal one day, and it's always been, is to have basically the business be across the country in a certain way.
Yeah, people say that, yeah.
But it's sort of it's gone from, I guess, a bit of a vanity thing where it was like, oh, this would be a great goal to have one day, to have a business that's got people all across the country, to go, no, there's actually a hole in the market that we could actually fill. But if I never did that, I wouldn't care, because it's about actually having good quality. If you can get the quality down and you can get the systems down in the background that make everything run, a bit like McDonald's. Like everybody, craps on McDonald's for their, the quality of the food. But the reality is the quality of the food is amazing, in the fact that you go to Sydney, it'll be the same burger that you have in Hong Kong. It'll be the same quality burger you have in London.
Yep.
Like, it's not the best thing you'll ever have, but their systems are amazing. And if you can get something like that, it's replicatable. I've talked too much. How are you feeling about this? Because you got a similar experience. Is that bringing up,
Yeah, I suppose similar. So, 2018, 2019, Ashley James Gardens was myself, an apprentice and a subcontractor. And then in 2020, right before COVID, was it? Yeah, might have been the end of 2019. We took over the horticultural industry of my father's company, where I'd done my apprenticeship and time, and I merged that with Ashley James, and we went from 3 to, I think we had maybe 10 full-time staff there at one point. COVID hit. World turned to hell down here. We used to maintain a lot of wedding venues throughout the Yarra Valley.
Right.
And when COVID hit, they didn't have a wedding for 2 years. So the first thing to go was the maintenance people. So I think at that point, we had around 60 clients, and I'm talking like larger acreage clients. So we had around 60. And they range from weekly to fortnightly to maybe once a month on some of them. And then COVID hit. We weren't allowed to work down here for around 3 months, and it was during probably the busiest spring that we had seen in years. So you think like these large acreage jobs where we've got clients, we're having 2 to 3 guys go there for a day a week. They're shut down for 3 months over the busiest spring. Then we're allowed back to work. I had 60 clients turn around and say to me, I want my place looking like it usually does. I can't do that because I've got 60 other clients who want the exact same thing. So I have to spread the load and try and make this work. Well, I've got a lawn mowing guy down the road that's happy to come in and do it right now. So I'm just going to use him. Bang by bang, drop off. And I've said it on previous podcasts before too, but like I obviously what you're doing works and you're clever with what you're doing. But I think with maintenance from our point of view was you either needed to go high end and charge, or you just did everything and you were happy to go through and just mow people's nature strips, and you could hit 8 nature strips in that street and then drive 10 minutes down the road and do 8 nature strips on that street.
Yep.
Whereas I that just didn't interest me. So for me, like we were doing like high end horticultural work where we were focused on planting, mulching, fertilizing, all that kind of stuff. But even with that, I would do that for a stint, and then I'd get bored, and then I'd want to do a design, and then I'd want to build it, and then I'd want to maintain it. And I was just like, I need to alter things. Staff, here we couldn't keep staff. We had a bunch of staff leave for multiple reasons, and then it just wasn't working. So not too long ago, I went back to, I've got myself an apprentice and a subcontractor who helps out. So I'm now designing, installing, and maintaining. I'll maintain gardens that I've designed and built. We're not really. We don't have those 60 clients anymore. I think I've got maybe 2, 3. That's it.
Right, interesting. So, I mean, there's a few things that are coming up, but the staff side, it's incredibly difficult. And what you look at when you look at the industry, right? In Australia, this is why the American business advice is limited, because you can make a successful business with employees in America a lot easier than you can here. And I would say one of the hardest businesses to build in the country is a +10 full-time equivalent garden maintenance business. And the reason why I would say that is I don't know of any, right? Sorry. Residential garden maintenance business. Commercial stuff, you can do it. And the reason is you don't know of many. And the reason why it's so difficult is you can only, with travel time, you have to have 1 or 2 people in the car, which means you have to have a lot of A players on your team. With commercial, you can have 5 people in the crew, 1 A player, 4 pretty good people. It works. You put a pretty good person out on the road on their own, making their own decisions, identifying and solving problems, falls apart. Yep. So that's why the franchise model works, because you incentivize people with essentially what is their own business, even though it is their own business. I don't want to discredit anybody who's doing that, but the marketing and stuff like that is taken care of them. So, but yeah, they're essentially their own business owners, right? And that's why if you go on like LMCA on Facebook, I don't know if you're a part of that group or anything. It's
No,
not necessarily. Yeah, that's more of the efficiency, economies of scale. Like just and there's a variety of people who do from amazing stuff, but your classic sort of lawn and garden contractor. But there's 6,000 people in that Facebook group. It's just a huge number of these people, and there's so few people who can break sort of 8, 9, 10 employees in the maintenance game that are focusing on smaller jobs because it's just you can't find the people. And I think what's going to happen is the market, it's either going to go two ways. You either are going to have it be one of it's just a massive lack of people in the industry doing the work because it can only be sustained by small businesses, and the small businesses, only a certain type of people are going to be interested in starting their small business, or someone's going to work out how to pay people $80,000 or $90,000 plus to do a gardening job to compete with other labor-intensive roles like civil construction or mining. And that's the only two things that can go. If you go down the small business route, it's going to be good for all the small businesses because there's not going to be enough work, and then people start getting robots. If you go down the employment route, it's going to be great for the people who are employees because finally they can earn a good living in gardening. But for the businesses that are trying to do that, that's the difficulty. You pay it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100. And it, I don't know. You asked me off air if I was a businessman or if I was a gardener. And as I listen to you speak, I think you obviously have a real passion for horticulture, but very clearly a businessman. Your mindset is business. You know your numbers. The fact that you know your numbers, and you've had business coaching, it could be from that as well. But you know your numbers, and I said it to you off air too. If I wanted to get rich and just make money, I would not be doing what I do because it's not the quickest and easiest way to make money.
Yeah, I see that. Yep.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me,
I love what I do, and I'm, I don't know, more like from my end, I just enjoy the art of it and designing, installing, and then the satisfaction to then come back and prune and shape and I enjoy. I'm one of those people that I enjoy what I do. We make enough money that we're comfortable, and I'm happy with that. But if I wanted to ramp up and be doing, ticking over millions and millions of dollars in revenue every year, then the business model that I have is not the right business model.
Yeah. I feel as well that here's another story that I've never told on the podcast. I actually put the business up for sale for about 3 weeks when I first started getting really unwell because I had an option where I was like, I know I can't do this work anymore, right? And I may never get better. So my options are grow the business, which I knew would be difficult because I'd tried it twice before, right? And failed both times. Failed to get to essentially one sustainable, unsupervised employee. But in the back of my head, I was like, I know the problems I made. I know I can solve some of those problems because I've been trialing and failing.
Yeah.
Or I can sell the business, take the cash, and I had an option, believe it or not. I have a very wealthy friend who buys and sells mining businesses. He's essentially an investor, millionaire guy, sort of guy. Yeah. There you go. This is a compliment. No. A guy over here buys and sells mining businesses. And I basically had an offer to go sell your business and come work for me. Right, non-physical job, office job. So I put my business up for sale. And I was like, I don't have a passion for it. I actually like the industry and I want to solve this problem. Nobody else I can see is really solving it. I haven't solved it yet, Essentially, you would say on paper that we've failed a third time. I wouldn't say that because it's a lot more complicated than that. If we didn't have the workers' compensation injury, I think we'd be in a completely different place, But that's the problem with having employees. You rely on human beings and things go wrong with human beings, even if the person's not intending it. But yeah, I could have gotten out of the industry and just gone and done essentially business. It's not satisfying. And do you know how much fun it is to be back out in the field mowing lawns? It's like people treat mowing, people who don't do it, mowing and gardening, as this is a lowly life. I honestly, if you were like, you're going to be a gardener for the rest of your life and you'll never have a successful business, right? Or you can have a really successful business, but it's in a completely different industry, I would still take gardener. You know, your only thing is my own health. That is your only thing that would stop me from making that choice, because ultimately then that would be about my family. Because if I couldn't do it, I'd have to make money for the family. But there's a passion, there's something about this industry and working out there, making things beautiful, making living things look good. It's just great, you know?
Yeah. I think, you know, and money does play a factor to it. Like I say that I come at it from a passionate point of view, but like my gardens and my style in particular are very English. My mum is from the UK, so I have I've been brought up with like an English background. I think one of the jobs that I would enjoy most is being an estate gardener on a big manor over in the UK, where you have potting sheds and you have grow houses and everything like this, where you do the seasonal rotation of the garden beds. I think I'd be happy as Larry, but I'd probably be making £500 a week, and I can't support a family of 5 off that.
Yeah. You got 3 kids.
We've got 3 kids, yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Good stuff. I would love to be working in a stadium if it wasn't for the weekends. You know, and I could do a botanical garden. I could do anything, right? Like if you just put me out there, and in fact, I could do landscaping. I love making things out of wood. You know, I love, I make, you know, I haven't done it for many years because of my health, but I made tables and things like that. And if you go to my warehouse, it's like, yeah, that's a whole different thing. But we have hanging baskets everywhere. I love the indoor style. And so anything that makes things look beautiful, and I'm working with my hands and I'm doing that, I just love that. And just sitting on a laptop, you know, I've done that as well with the business for the last 2.5 years or whatever it was. There's just not, it's missing something. And maybe it's primal. Like we were supposed to be farmers. That was not, you know, that's what we used to do. Hunting, gathering, you know, catching animals, you know?
No, I think you're right, because like I said, when the design rush went through the roof, like I sat in this office, which is a hideous office, like it's ugly, but I've got my work desk here, and the next room is my design table. So I have a big drafting table set up just there. I've got a bathroom here, and then my house is 20, 25 steps that way. So I can make a cup of coffee. My garden is right behind me, so I've got beautiful inspiration all around me. But just being in here drafting, and I love it, but I need to have a mixture. So I think I've found that now, where I can design, and we produce very high quality, detailed designs. But then we can install that, and then, you know, for the right client, we may not be doing the maintenance, but we might do the winter prune, and we might guide them on general maintenance throughout the year. So I think it's the variety. That's probably the best thing, is the variety, you know. And then if it pelts down with rain for 2 days and we've serviced everything that we can in the shed, then I can come in here and draft and do whatever I've got to do, and then, you know, get back out on site.
That's actually good. See, that's the thing. Like, that's a really smart way of doing it, because I don't have that luxury today. I was actually, when I was on the phone to you today, and could you hear all the sprinklers going?
It was really weird. I just heard myself talking, because you called me via Instagram, so it was just like I wasn't sure what was going on.
I couldn't get a speaker.
As you've learned, Luke's been client hasn't said it, but like I actually thought that this podcast was on Thursday night and not Tuesday night. So I got a message from Luke's waiting on me, and it was a mad rush trying to get everything organised to make this happen. I was halfway through putting the kids down to bed, so today's just been a shambles for me, mate. So I apologise.
But I was doing this job. I was doing a job at the school that we do, right? We've got aeration and some fertilizing, and that was what was down for today. And so I've got to test the sprinklers just to make sure they're working. And there's this whole station which is just stuffed. and I'm trying to fix things. It's basically filled with gunk. I'm like, what the heck? I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was skipped in the last maintenance run or over winter, a lot of gunk got in there. I don't know, right? But all the sprinklers are clogged up, the MP rotors, and I'm working on it. And I'm just like, I'm not going to get the aeration done because it's a whole day job to aerate this whole school and fertilize it, right? And so I don't really have any space to reschedule it. We're basically booked out until November. So I was like, oh, I'll be back on the weekend. That's my only option, So having that flexibility to be like, I can do design, that's one of the downsides of the industry. It's like boom and bust. Like winter, you got all this free time, and then like spring, it's like, I can't.
See, I'm flat out in winter. I specialize in winter pruning because of where I'm.
That's
located.
True. And I was going, we haven't. You said you were like more technical. Stuff, yeah. I've got like questions. I wanted to ask you about veggie gardens because that's such a big thing about you do. Vineyard.
Yep.
I mean, I've got all the time in the world. We're at an hour and a half. But let's keep going if you're going to stay away.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move away from business and let's tell me about, because I've never pruned a vine other than to clean it up, right? As someone's
as in a grapevine.
Grapevine, yes, yeah, of course. Yeah. There's lots of different vines. A grapevine. So I don't actually know the technical way to do it. Fruit tree pruning, rose pruning, I've done that, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert, right? And then veggie gardens, I had Craig Castry on last week, and I don't know much at all about it. And you've had this as such a big part of your business, so I could learn pretty much everything from you. So go.
Not after Craig from last week. Craig was blowing me away with all the advice he was giving too. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I listened to Craig's interview last week, and I was just like, whoa, that man is a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was in the middle of the day when I did that podcast, and I, again, was running behind. And so I tried to get everything done in the morning and have it done for the podcast, and I had to cut it off at an hour and a half. But we could have gone forever with that podcast,
Yeah, just a wealth of knowledge, that man. So
let's start with this. Vineyards. What the hell is that? Vineyards. How do you get that work to start with? Is it just the area you're in?
Yeah, so I'm in the Yarra Valley, which is like we're known for our vineyards and everything like that out here. We've got the Borderley wines and all that kind of stuff, 15 minutes down the road. The majority of the larger estates, such as the Borderley, have their own crews, or they'll bring a pruning team, which will come through and do that. I don't do any of that stuff. It's too large. I've got no interest.
Yeah.
But we do have a lot of smaller boutique vineyards in the area that I come from, and we prune those and kind of focus on those. So there's two ways to do that, where you can do a spur or a cane prune. A cane prune is where you're focusing on tying down new canes from last year's that's put on last year's growth. We'll cut that back and we'll tie them down. And a spur prune is where we stick with the canes from last year, but we actually spur off the canes and just kind of cut them, just a 1-2 bud system.
I'm gonna put a photo on if I can.
Yeah.
Okay.
So see that top one, how that's called cane pruning, and you can see there that we've now reduced the vine back to 2 canes, so one going either side.
Yep.
And that's all we're knocked back to. We may have a spur or 2 coming from the crown in the center there, just to give us a couple of options for next year. And usually when I do a cane prune, I don't just run the 2, I'll run 4. So I'll have 2 on the bottom and then I'll have 2 on the top as well.
Is that because that's where they've got their what you would call the trellis and I would call the wire, or is there something else for it?
Correct. Yeah. So you'll run the wire through there. So down your vineyard rows, you'll have your tree
roughly where my little cursor is.
No, actually where the canes are. Up where the canes are.
Here.
So you tie them straight.
Okay. All right. Yep.
And then I would because you have quite a few different rows of wire in the vineyard, I'd then have that come up again and then go off with another set of canes going either way.
All right. Okay. And then, so what this is called spur pruning. So there's a lot of little knobbly things back on there. Do you know, I should describe this to people listening. Sorry, if you're listening, it's basically like the trunk of the vine. Is that even what you use the word for?
Yep.
They've called it a scion. Oh, no, it says trunk.
Next to it,
there we go.
Trunk.
Look, I can pretend like I know what I'm doing. If I edit this correctly,
yeah.
And basically, there's just branches or vines coming out. You've called them canes, but two at the top. Looks like pretty bare. Not much left on that. And then you got the one down the bottom, which is it's a lot fatter. Those two things coming out a lot fatter, and it's got a lot more buds coming out of it.
It's not that it has more bud. No, you're right. So it's not that it has more buds coming out of it. So for people that are listening, if you can imagine just the letter T, like a capital T, and that's what it looks like. So the top of the T going across is your canes, and then the main stem coming down is your trunk. Now, when we come down to this second one, where we're talking about the spur pruning, all that is those, there's still canes that go off to the side there, okay, but they have been there for more than one season. And, and where the buds are, that's where those spurs are. So all we're doing is trimming those off at a 1 or 2 bud growth, and then they will produce from there. So this is a much faster way to prune, but you don't get fresh stock come through every year. Whereas if you scroll back up to the cane pruning, all those little dots that are coming off those canes are buds, and they will turn into spurs. And then those spurs then come into more, grow into the canes and go up. So it's a little bit hard to try.
You get more fruit from the more aggressive prune. Is that what you're saying? So more work, but more fruit.
You'll get similar fruit on both. The difference is you're going to get fresh fruit, fresh growth off your cane pruning, but your spur pruning is a much faster way to do it. So to do a cane prune, I've got to cut out possibly 24 to 32 canes of old growth that I no longer want to then tie down 4 different new canes. Whereas the spur pruning, it's from last year's stock, it's already been tied. All I need to do is pretty much go through with a hedge trimmer, and not that I would ever do it with a hedge trimmer, but go through with a pair of Secateaurs and just go bang, 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 strip the canes out, and it's done.
Okay. I've got to go pee. I'm going to come back. I've got about 4 questions. All right? Is that okay?
Yeah. Is this going live? How's this work?
No, I'll pause it. Okay, so that's cane pruning, start pruning. I'm back from my pee break. First thing that's coming to mind, you're not doing this all with hand tools, right? Like,
no, I do it all by
massive. You don't, like, no battery-powered secateurs or anything?
No interest whatsoever. So I have my pruning kit is about a 3,000. I've got a bag, a Nawaki bag, and that has about $3,000 worth of hand tools in there. And I have handcrafted Tobisho secateurs from Japan, which is made by hand forged by a family over there that have been forging steel for thousands of years, and they slice through everything like butter.
But your hands should surely hurt. I mean, like, how good? Okay, it's just the same head shears that Craig from Southern Cross Gardens using.
So similar. He has Japanese ones. Yes, I have. So the brand that I use, which is Tobisho, they're like the duck's nuts. Like they're very, very, very expensive, but they're well worthwhile. So I don't do a lot of maintenance, but what I do specialize in is winter pruning. And it's probably the most enjoyable job that I find throughout the whole year. I have one of my old apprentices who's now back subcontracting to me. He runs the Falcos, and he said to me while we were doing this big mulberry tree, he said, "Well, really, how much better can they be?" The 3 cuts he made with my secateurs, and he goes, well, "Okay, well, yep, fair enough."
Yeah, okay, interesting. I got Falcos, and the difference between a Falco and your standard $15 Bunnings thing is quite noticeable too.
It is. So you've got a $15 thing, and then you've got a pair of Falcos, which will probably cost you about $120. And my Tobishos are about $230 to $250 a set.
Man, have you ever used the battery one and just not been happy with it, or you just don't need it?
No interest. I like the craftsmanship of what we use.
See.
Yeah. But again, that's where it probably comes back to I'm a bad businessman because I'm too interested in the craft.
Yeah, I see it. It's the same with
batteries. Probably. Do I get a beautiful cut with this? So that's the other thing too that I hate when you see people that are like, "Oh, I've had my roses pruned by a professional, and it's all split and it's damaged and it's
oh my goodness, yes."
Ugh.
I'm going to show you a photo, if I can, of something that I posted, and you have a warning for emotional damage here. Okay,
Okay.
all right. I'm going to try and find this. It might take me a little bit.
Yep.
Whilst I'm doing this, have you ever rocked up to a job? Because I'm about to tell you a story of when I've rocked up to a job and it's just somebody else that really screwed it up, right? Surely that happens all the time for you as well. Any stories
Not
that come to mind?
not so much now, but again with like the say for argument's sake, the wedding reception place where we're working at the moment, they initially got onto us via seeing us on the block with Channel 9, contacted us
Yep.
to come out. One of their main features and selling points of this venue is this beautiful wisteria arbor. Now, this wisteria arbor is probably about 12 to 15 meters wide, and it's about 30 odd meters long, maybe a little bit longer, 30, 40 meters long. It's huge. And they had this beautiful wisteria arbor, but it hadn't been pruned in 4 to 5 years over all
Oh,
the big
wow.
growth that we had. And they had brides. So during the flowering season, they'll book out 30 to 40 weddings just for people trying to get married underneath the flowers of the wisteria. This hadn't been pruned in about 4 to 5 years, so it had flower heads, but they were about from 6 to 12 foot high above the arbor,
Yep.
and nobody could see them. So we had to come through and cut all this thing back, and I'm currently back working there, and it's the parts that we haven't pruned are now in flower and look amazing, and what we have pruned is still just back to bare sticks. So it's a hard one to kind of sell to the client, because I said to them, you're going to lose a season of flowers here where you're not going to get that big influx of growth.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
So with the wisteria, I don't have too much experience with it. Can you avoid that just by like annual maintenance on it?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're dealing with a wisteria, you need to do maintenance on it, because again, with my style, wisterias are one of my favorite climbers to use. However, if you don't keep them under control and keeping them in check, they can cause damage. So you'll see people that will plant them right up against a house and brickwork. It's kind of asking for trouble. So
Yeah.
like I love wisterias, but you need to stay on top of them.
Okay, are you prepared emotionally for this? I went to this old lady's house, and she had. So her husband was a rose fanatic. He's passed away. She's probably in her 80s, and she can't do it herself. She's too old to do it herself. She's hired somebody else. And this is what I rocked up to.
Is that a cut?
That's a cut.
Oh my god!
We're one photo down here, mate. Like, let me try and center this for you. That's another one.
Is this from a professional company?
Apparently, I think it was Cowboy. So if you zoom in on people, you got to jump on. These are the most mangled cuts. I think someone's done this with a hedge trimmer. I think that's what's happened. But all up here was supposed to be. Now, if you go to see the front there, her entire front garden. I don't know if I've gotten. No, that's back to the beginning. But her entire front garden, roses, all the way up the side of the house, rose, all the way along the back fence, roses. I think it was 65 roses, something like that, in the 60s. And they all were just abused. Hasn't been thinned out or anything. It's just the tops were cut off. And this lady, now, I did have some comments on this saying, well, what did she pay? Maybe she should have, if it was a really cheap quote, maybe she could have, seen this coming, but.
No, I disagree with that. Without even knowing the circumstances, if you've got her late husband who's planted that, she's not going to be cheaping out on that. She would be wanting to pay respect to him and his roses. So she would have just, approached someone who seemed like a nice guy, and that's bad.
It is bad. That's horrible. What I will say though is she didn't accept our quote, but then again, I wasn't expecting her to accept it, because the problem is, essentially, you have to do the whole job with with something like that. You can't. The guy hasn't saved me any time. If I'm going to go and do,
not at all. He's actually made
job.
it work, because he's taken out possible. I would be going lower than that, or like much lower than that.
Same.
he has taken out, possibilities. If he's run a hedge trimmer through that too, he could have snapped them lower down. Like, yeah, there's a lot wrong with those photos that you've just shown me.
And that's the thing about back to the industry, and we don't want to talk about business too much, but we already did that. But the low barrier to entry in this is just a pair of $15 Bunnings Secateaurs, or the head trimmer that you pay $200 for, or whatever it is. So it's so easy to get into, and you can get some images off the internet of Ashley James's Instagram photos, pretend that's you, and there you go, you get some jobs or whatever it is, So it's, yeah, I mean, that's why people expect lower prices sometimes, because they've had experiences with that kind of work, and
Yeah, it's very easy for me to talk to. I mean, it's harder when you said before, like, is it better to learn via the book or on site? The pruning, for argument's sake, that's the type of thing I need to show you on site, because a textbook, like, they vary. Every single one varies. And the same as our cane with our vineyards, like, we might do a spur and a mixture of a cane prune because the growth's different. It's very easy for me on site to be able to explain to a client what they're paying for by myself coming through and doing it.
Yeah.
Well,
I want to
touch on is the steri pruning. Like, I steri prune all our cuts. So I don't know if you guys have that over there, but I use a steri prune on all my larger cuts, and on the majority of my smaller cuts, where we'll paint like a sealant over the top of the cuts to stop the water from getting through and rotting everything out.
Yeah, I don't do that on roses, and I've heard of it on fruit trees. We don't prune that many. Citrus we would, as in not that we do a steri prune, but and you talk about sterilization basically, but we wouldn't do it on a citrus, and we don't really have. I can only think of one client that had a lot of fruit trees, because remember, the block sizes that we're doing are quite small. So you'll get hits of ornamental plums and pears and all that sort of stuff. But other than citrus trees, we don't get a whole lot of people who've got like an apple. There's one client who's got an apple. But yeah, but that's just because that was inherited with the house that they have. We don't have that sort of stuff in our climate, or in Perth at least,
Yeah.
So, yeah. However, there's a suburb interesting called Seville Grove. I used to live there, and it was literally all, Seville orange groves. And if you stand in certain areas, you can stand on the roof, and there's an orange tree in everyone's backyard in the same spot. They actually left a lot of the trees, and built the house. So left them in the backyard, designed the streets around where the trees were. So anyway, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So, how do you get into the veggie side of it? Because here's the other thing. Very rarely do we get asked, but if someone was to ask me, I've got a veggie patch, can you maintain the veggie patch? I would just say no. I don't have the knowledge, and I feel like the amount of time it would take me to get it looking good and to do all that sort of stuff, I just don't feel like the expense would be worth it. But this is something that you were saying before is a massive part of why people come to you, is to have a design that includes veggie gardens.
Yeah, so I will design and we will install, but I will not maintain, and I will not plant out. Yeah. The reason why I'll quite often have clients say to me, "Oh, can you just plant it out?" And I will tell them no, because I don't know what you like to eat, and I don't know what diet requirements you have, and I don't know what works for your family. So what works for you may not work for me, and that may not work for yourself. So yeah, it's I always say to people that, and I think too, if people are coming to me for a design and for us to install it, they're coming to me for a garden that they want to be involved in and they want to garden.
That's true. Yeah.
So it's about myself designing it so that it works, installing and implementing it, and then guiding them to enjoy it. So
yeah. And I think that's why most people get into it to start with. They're not really chasing, well, some of them are chasing better quality food, but I think a lot of them are chasing that connection with their food, which they would lose if they were paying a gardener to do it,
So, I mean, your guest last week, was his name Craig? Sorry, was it?
Yeah, Craig, yeah.
So Craig, I heard say, and I didn't even know this, that with your sweet corn, that once it's been harvested, you have 20 minutes before it's locked. right? For
It's losing
myself,
its yeah,
for myself,
losing its nutrition. Sorry.
yeah, within 20 minutes. So my kitchen garden is right behind my office. My house is just there. If it was the daylight, I'd take you out and do a tour. Well, I probably wouldn't because it looks a bit crap at the moment. And in the
It's
world
like
of
Instagram ready.
social media, it looks amazing.
Yeah.
So I literally harvest my sweet corn. I walk 20 meters and I'm in my kitchen. Bang, there you go.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's one of those things. If you go nuts and you build like a big market garden style, that you can then start harvesting and canning and preserving everything, you can save money. On a smaller scale, you're not going to save money, but you will get much better quality.
It's about the enjoyment because you surely have seen all those memes where it's like I've spent $600 on soil, $300 on supplies, 5 months and 300 liters to produce this 45-cent carrot.
Exactly it, yeah. So my wife used to send me memes like that all the time, taking the piss out of me, and now she has got chickens and ducks, so she'll get the eggs from the chickens.
Oh yes,
the amount of I had to build them a freaking enclosure, and like that alone, probably 1,500, $2,000 just on materials. And then we've got to the non-stop upkeep on those for eggs, which I could go to the supermarket and buy quite cheaply, but the quality of the ones that we produce are much better.
Yeah. Have you seen I shared it on my story that once you get a chicken, you start becoming a conspiracy theorist?
I didn't see.
Did you see that one? Because this guy was talking. He was very casual and funny about it, but he was like, it's a gateway for conspiracy theories because you get your chicken and then you start tasting eggs and go, oh, these are really good, and then you research why they're different and you realize factory farming, and so you go, why are they doing this? And then you start growing your own veggies, and then you go, oh, why are these better? And then you start making your own sourdough, and then you realize, you just start getting sort of anti-corporation, anti-big, big business, and you just go down this. So it's like, just be aware, if you get chickens, you'll enjoy your eggs, but you'll also start becoming a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. I'll keep an eye on my wife, actually.
Well, look,
hat over there.
I'm having a lot of fun, but talking about your wife, it is 10:35 over where you are, and she's probably getting grumpy about how late this is going on, I guess would be.
Mate, she'll be having the time of her life. She'll be watching whatever show she wants to be watching. She'll be sending you a thank you basket for getting me out of the house.
Well, I mean, it's only 8:35 here. Do you want to keep going?
If you've got the time. Yeah, that's fine. No,
okay, let me go back to my questions. Okay, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, so I know a lot about lawn products. What sort of products are you using for vines? And I've got ideas for roses, but, what are you using for those sorts of... Oh, we didn't even talk about fruit trees. Do you want to touch on your fruit tree pruning? And what are you using to sterilize everything? Okay, you see, I was trying to wrap it up, but I had about 16 things there that I could have talked
No, you're right. So the product that I use from it is literally called Steri-Prune. So you can Google that and have a look at it. I do have people out there that will turn around and say they don't like it. They believe that it can, runs the risk of trapping in disease into the plant. I strongly disagree, and I'm using it more as a water. There we go. So you've got the spray cans, you've got that paint, and then the one that I use is like a thicker tar, and I use that to stop the water from getting through and rotting out any of our larger vines, fruit trees, stuff like that.
Do you have a sponsorship with them or something?
Nope, never spoken to anybody from there, and I stand by them. So I get asked to do sponsorships and different things, and I was just asked by a well-known cheaper market drill and every battery accessory to do like a sponsorship thing.
Right,
but I try to go down a political path. I'm not sure, but anyway, it's not my brand.
They are not going to listen to this podcast. Let's just be frank here. Yeah. We don't have, even though it's one of the bigger podcasts in the little niche, we do not have the vanity numbers that anybody's going to be like from Ryobi's going to be listening to this.
Joel Barnett is currently emailing them the link to this video right now.
That's true. We've set ourselves up for failure. Oh dear. But yeah, I can understand. I wouldn't take a sponsorship from Ryobi either, you know?
yeah, just not my cup of tea. So I have no sponsorship, no affiliation with these guys. I've used them for years and stand by it. I think it's a really good product.
Well, hold on, I got to pause. For all my friends who do take sponsorship from Ryobi, if your target market is the home DIY market, I don't have a problem with that. Like that is what they're made for. My target market is commercial contractors and people like that. That's why I wouldn't do it. See, now I'm becoming political, you know. So there you go, Ryobi. But no, yeah, okay. Back to it. Ryobi sucks now. Anyways, I'm just digging all these holes. Back to Stereo Brew.
I'm just gonna sit quietly over here. Yeah, yeah. No, so again, yeah, no sponsorship with them, but no, I've used them for years. I stand by it. My father introduced me to it, and he's one of the best horticulturalists that you'll ever meet. So I stand by his judgment on a lot of things.
So you're using Stereo Prune, and you're doing that on. Okay, is this just plants that are prone to disease, or are you pretty much doing that every time?
I'll do that on the majority of cuts. Yeah, if it's easy enough to reach to. On the wisteria tunnel, we didn't do it. I did have a little bit of one of the wisterias. It had actually, the side of it had completely rotted out. So in my pruning kit, I have really sharp timber chisels, and I like wood chisels, and I actually shaved out all the rotted and damaged diseased wood. Cleaned all that back to a nice surface, and then painted that or blew it all out, and then painted that with Stereo Prune.
Right. It's man, so you're really going into it.
Yeah.
What do
I love pruning. It's my favorite job.
Okay. All right. See, this is interesting because here's what I've done with the very few like apple trees, apples, like we've done loquats, things like that, right? When I'm pruning that, I'm using a handsaw, and it takes me a very long time because I don't feel very confident. I haven't done enough. And I think the last time I did it was probably 3 years ago, but that's because of health stuff. I did a hedge reduction the other day, and my goodness, am I slow at hedge reductions now? Just because I haven't done it in a while. But it's like I cut, and then I stand back, and I look at it, and then I go back and I cut, and I stand back, and I look at it, and I go back, and it's. How are you going about it? Do you just rock up and you can just stand in there and you just go, I know exactly how this should look. I'm just bing, done.
Without sounding too cocky, yes. But again, it comes with 20 years of experience. A lot of the orchards that I am also pruning have been done by my father for the past 30 years, and then I've taken them on as clients.
Oh, okay.
So they have been shaped up for generations by us now. So there's a little bit more love into them. But again, I grew up with this in this industry, so I can look at it and just know where it needs to go to.
Yeah, see, I didn't really have. No one's ever really taught me how to prune a fruit tree. It was all like
come on down to Melbourne next winter. We'll put some wellies on you and put you to work.
Do you know, in all seriousness, I do want to do a trip, and I've talked about this with Carrie. And in winter, when we're quiet, and go and visit all the people that I've actually done podcasts with, and then do live in-person podcasts, like at their garden, or that'd be awesome. Like it'd be a nice tax write-off as well, you know.
Yeah, for sure. As a holiday. Do that, come down, and then Joel can shout us the surf and turf for lunch. Day set, done.
Surf and turf? Do they sell that at KFC? No, but I would love to do it. That would be such a cool thing, you know. But people have got to sign up to our Patreon for me to be able to afford that, because that would also be incredibly expensive to do. And the other thing that's about it, which and people like Ben Sims or Brenton Climb, or these guys who are doing the 15-minute weekly YouTube videos, they're so hard to do. Like an in-person thing. I've done a couple of in-person podcasts. It's so much more editing. Like, just anyways, it's a whole thing. So it would actually be a hell of a lot of work. It wouldn't just be like rocking up to someone's house. You have to get the cameras and the lighting and the audio and everything, and record it and have backups just in case something fails. And so, anyways, people, it's a good excuse to jump on my Patreon. Moving on from that,
I do know Joel found that too. Like when he first started his podcast, he was doing them all in person. He was driving out to see everybody. And I think he did one with Jason Hodges, and he said that he had maybe 3 or 4 microphones set up, and they all failed apart from one. So it was a really low quality audio.
Yeah,
It was a struggle.
it's tough. And yeah, I did that with anyway. I did this episode with Wally on from ICL. I don't know if you ever listened to that one. It was an earlier one. It was the first one I did in person, and I spent so much time editing it, and it took forever, and I was rushed, and then I uploaded the wrong file. And I actually uploaded the unedited file because in my rush, I named them the same thing.
Oh no!
So, and then like people were messaging me like, because we had this thing where the microphone stand fell over, and I was screwing it back into a piece of wood, and Wally and I having a laugh. I was like, I'll edit this out later. And the other thing, I mean, I'll say it now, but I was supposed to have Jason Hodges come on the weekend after that podcast, and we were talking about it. And I was like, I won't say this on air because I've actually given Jason a way out of coming onto the podcast because he had a lot on. And I messaged him. I was like, hey, would you like to come on? He was like, yeah, I'd love to come on. He's like, I'm really busy. I'm actually going to Perth. I'm like, well, I'm in Perth if you're not too busy. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. But I was like, okay, I don't want to pressure you or anything. And anyway, he ended up messaging me. Oh, I got too much. No stress. But anyways, I accidentally put this in the middle of the podcast that, so I've thrown Jason Hodges under the bus. He still hasn't come on the podcast, so we got to get him on one day. Here's one I would really love. Yes. So
he's such a nice bloke. It's so funny because you speak to him in person, and he's just such an Aussie bloke. Like he's just hilarious. He loves it. Like we both like country music, so we were talking about that. And yeah, no, he's a good bloke, Jay.
You like country music? How old were you when you were dropped on your head?
Here we go.
Joe Barnett's loving this. He's like, yes, we're getting some back. I don't mind some country music. I pretty much like everything, but I wanted to have a dig. What am I doing? So I'm coming over in apparently to help you with some fruit tree pruning so I can learn. But before I learn that, what am I supposed to be looking out for other people who might be interested in this when winter comes around?
For them to learn how to do it, or
yeah, like what sort of things do you look for in a fruit tree prune that would be different from, say, a rose prune? Because I think a lot of people would know how to prune a rose.
It's actually yeah, and then you just show me those photos.
Exactly, so. Yeah. So that came out of my mouth. But there are, what I should say to clarify, people who have experience in gardening will have experience with pruning roses, and hopefully they're doing it properly. So what can they transfer from that knowledge over to fruit trees?
Well, if they're pruning their roses correctly, they'll be trying to achieve a vase shape. And the idea of that is that you're trying to create a vase with your roses that you have a hollowed out inside that you can allow for the airflow to go through, the sunlight to get into, and it cuts down on your diseases. And you're trying to do the same thing with the fruit trees as well. So you're trying to create that vase shape with keeping the height under control without affecting your fruiting spurs. You don't want to take everything off, that you take out all your spurs that are going to fruit and produce the apples or whatever it might be. But the other thing with fruit trees too is you don't want them to be huge, because you want to be able to pick the fruit, and you want to be able to pick the fruit without getting up a 10-foot ladder to be able to reach through the centre trying to grab that pink lady apple. So it's about keeping it manageable.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot. Like the wisteria you're talking about before, the flowers are going fine. You're not pruning it to encourage more flowers, but the flowers are in the wrong spot. You can't see them, sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's you've got your spurs, and you can't just cut everything you can't just go through the hedge trimmer and just do like a wham bam. Like you've got to take your time on them.
Do you ever cut, like say with I remember chopping change to wisteria, but with wisteria, would you ever do like a cut back with a hedge trimmer just to get rid of volume and give you a bit more access?
No.
Okay.
Just no. No,
it's almost like you're offended at this suggestion.
Well, it's more just like, again, I don't have many maintenance clients. So the people that do come to me, they know that I'm not going to be quick, and they know that I'm going to do one cut, pull a cane back, stand back and go, yeah, okay, no, this is where I need to go. So they watch me do it, and they understand why it takes so long at times.
Yep. Yeah.
But I think I jump in the vineyard and like I've been working on that vineyard since I was 14. So I can jump in the vineyard and go through and prune that really quickly. But with other stuff, like I take my time with it. It's not a rush. But I always say that to everybody too. I'm not the cheapest. If you just want a cheap job, then don't call me, because I'm going to take my time to make sure that it's done right.
What do you do after? So let's go back to fruit trees. What do you do after fruit tree pruning? So you've done your steri prune. What are you doing? Do you fertilize? If so, what sort of product?
So this is where it comes back to how I said we don't do a great deal of maintenance, because the majority of my maintenance work now is we will do our winter prune and then that is it. They'll have general maintenance done on the property by other people or by themselves. For argument's sake, we'll run a lime sulfur spray around, try and get on top of all the mites, which we do in the vineyards and everything like that as well. The thing that you need to watch, I suppose, on the size of the properties that we work on out here is that you're beyond being able to just apply your organic, easy home recipe, treatments. Whereas we're a little bit more in that agricultural sense where you're applying those harsher chemicals and stuff like that. So again, these may not be done by us. They may be done by professional spraying contractors.
Yeah. People who that's their world. Your pruning is your world, spraying is their world. Work together as a team.
That's it, yeah. So the maintenance that we do now is really for 3 months a year. We'll prune solid for 3 months, and then the rest of the time we're designing and installing, unless it's doing general maintenance on one of my designs. In which case, like the gardens that I build from a fertilizing point of view, I don't do anything. We build the gardens that we create. They kind of build their own little microclimates, and they just kind of take care of themselves.
Yeah, well, if you're putting all the soil in to begin with, and you've got control of everything, then you can sort of get around that, especially if you know really well the plants that you're putting in. You know, what about even with roses, or like there's some plants that are very just hungry boys. Even with roses, would you just not even bother? Or you might put down some manure or something, but that's it.
If it needed it, but the majority of what we find is we don't really need to add too much to it because of the gardens and the mulch that we use. I suppose with the mulch in itself, like you'll get people that will use a dyed wood chip mulch. I don't do
black
that.
Or red.
Yeah,
for those who go, oh my goodness, is that not natural color?
Yeah, that's it. So it says it's red gum mulch. Yeah, no, we don't. We stay away from that stuff. So we use more of like a compost soil mixture, which will then feed back into the ground, and I suppose I'm fertilizing it that way as well. But yeah, we don't do a great deal of feeding. They just kind of, as long as we've got water up to them in the right areas to get them established, and then once they're established, they kind of take care of themselves.
Right. It's so interesting because a key part of what we do with any of the garden maintenance plans we have is, I guess you have so much. If you're starting from the basis of knowing that you're going to maintain it, I'd be doing what you're doing. We come into gardens that someone's just plonked something in the ground. Yeah. And fertilizing is so much of what we do.
Well, I guess that's probably what you said. What you just said there too is like I'm doing it from, like I'm laying in the groundwork from the start. So it's not like I've just kind of just gone, oh, I'm just going to dig a hole and put something in there. Like we prep everything. We do a lot of prep before we install.
Yeah, and that's I mean, that's the professional side of it. That's also what makes it so expensive a lot of the time. That's what clients want to cut their corners on.
It is. I suppose, like I am a little bit lucky now that we're not necessarily fighting for cost. It's more that they want our design and they want our style. And once I explain to them why we do what we do, it makes sense to them. It's the whole thing about horticulture. Like it is the most underrated industry in this country, and it doesn't get the respect that it deserves. And I do think that is because we've got cowboys in the industry that are wrecking for it and that are lowballing and affecting the industry. But the thing with horticulture is education. If we can educate our clients to why we do what we do and why it costs what it costs, then they're fine with it.
And that's that. You literally just explained exactly why the podcast exists.
Yeah.
Because
Which is why I
one,
got onto it, yeah, because it's great, because there's a lot of American podcasts out there where it's like, yeah, cool, we're not going to do a concrete slab and then mortar in our pavers. We just do this crushed rock base and do this, and it's all this information that has nothing to do with Australia, and you can take bits and pieces from it, but you've got to listen to a podcast for 2 hours before you can take anything from it that's going to be relevant to an Australian
and
context.
then you
Or
have to modify it, and
exactly,
you know, or they might say, oh, we use you know, this thing called prune, and it doesn't even
yeah,
exist in our, you know, commercial. Yeah, you got to buy it from somewhere in Europe or something and ship it over,
yeah,
and
that's it.
all that sort of stuff. But the whole thing that, like, this, you know, you and I, we're actually very similar in that your dad was, my dad was sort of in the industry in that he was in agriculture, and your dad was doing some sort of agriculture. You grew up, you started very, very young, all this sort of stuff we haven't talked about, but I just know from listening to the podcast you did with Joel,
Mhm.
you know, the evil, terrible, demonic Joel Barnett.
That guy. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man, so many
That guy
people for
does.
listening to this are going to go to the podcast. But the thing for me is you go and have this for I lost my train of thought. Oh yes, you were talking about, yeah, the underappreciated, you know, industry and the cowboys who, you know, the low ballers. Do you know the podcast, the very early one I did on how to get your pricing right, has had more than 4,000 people watch that podcast
Yeah, it doesn't
through
swing on.
YouTube and all sorts of stuff. I don't know how many contractors there are in the country, but you know, I've heard that there's 18,000 businesses registered from
Mhm.
one of the other podcast hosts who told me, and so 4,000. I don't know, a couple of people listen to it a few times. There'd be at least 1,000 different contractors who have watched that podcast. To
Yeah.
me, the value of that is there's 1,000 people who probably are not going to go out of business if they put it into practice, because it's
Yeah.
not just like, oh, it makes it harder for you. It makes it impossible for them. If you're charging $50 an hour, you're probably taking home about $15 an hour, just on the rough maths I have from experience. You know,
Yeah.
it'll vary, but you're not making any more money than you would working at Subway as a
Yeah.
part-time
No,
sandwich
exactly
artist.
it. But you're working sandwich artist. But you're working a hell of a lot harder for it.
Yeah, it is. I remember I had this crisis in my business very early on, and I would always go to Subway for lunch. Believe it or not, I probably eat more Subway than KFC. I do like KFC more, but my waistline doesn't. But I was at Subway, and I remember this is the first time I tried to get an unsupervised employee. And at the end of the year, a year and a half with him, we parted ways, and I'd lost $27,000 through having him on the business. Not his fault. I just didn't know how to do business. I was charging $60 plus GST at the time. And I went to Subway. I was in Subway and I was like, I would have been better off working part-time, not even full-time,
Yep.
at Subway. I would have actually made money, you know, and I could have just, you know, chilled out for the rest of the time. Now, I learned a lot of invaluable experiences, but that's why that sort of came up. It's like the sandwich artist thing is a real story for me. But there's all these people who lose their business. They love gardening and they would love to do it. And they actually might not be cowboys in a technical sense, but business-wise, they're very weak and they needed that. And the second side is the people who don't, what you've just shared on like prune, or, you know, a few little things on how to prune, you know, whoever listens to this, there might be 10 contractors who up their game, right, in that one area. You just benefited the whole industry, you know, and after
And
a couple of hundred, yeah, you go.
So I was just going to say, like, I've got a real love for it. Like, I love everything that we do in the industry, and I've got a real passion for it. I have people message me all the time on Instagram, and will speak to anyone that's taken the time of day to write a message to me. I will speak to them, and will quite often throw my phone number out and just say, look, if you want to have a chat, give me a call. I'm not saying that I know everything, but
You're about to get a bunch of messages.
it's
Do you regret that now?
just going
All
to
the
be Joel's
contractors
family. Just Joel's mum. What I was going to say is, and I think I'm right in saying this, is it that the majority of small businesses fail after 12 months?
It's something like that, and it's huge. It's 60, 80 something percent, you know, in that
Okay.
ballpark.
And the reason for that being in a business, say like a general maintenance lawn mowing business, you can run a very a very unsuccessful business for a long time with cash flow, and you won't realize that you're doing the wrong thing until you come to the end of the year where you sit down with your accountant. If you've got cash flow because you've got regular maintenance clients and you're not putting away, you're not doing, you're just kind of going week to week until you get to the end of the year, you'll think you're doing all right.
Yeah. And hopefully you're checking your numbers more than once a year.
But that's the thing, like when people first go out on their own and they're not sure on what they're doing, and even people that are qualified in the industry, you may know about stereo pruning, you may know how to prune a fruit tree, but you don't sit down with anyone and learn how to do a bass statement.
No, you don't. And why isn't that not taught in school? Why do I know algebra and I don't know basic small business? How many people as a population, as a percentage of the population, whether it's gardening or whatever, hairdressing or beginning, whatever, how many people go start a small business as a percentage?
Yeah.
And then how many people go do algebra?
Yeah, 100%.
It's like, man, like just teach the basics of algebra so we know, whether we like it or not, and then do small business stuff. Like why? I used to think I didn't like books, right? And then I found audiobooks.
Yeah,
I loved audiobooks.
Live off them.
I used to think I didn't like technical things because the stuff that school taught that was technical were things I just wasn't interested in. And I love technical things, just I have to be interested in it. And it's the same with, I know they do agricultural schools and things like that, but like you don't learn much about plants that's interesting in school, right?
Oh,
but how many people go and work in agriculture? Not even horticulture, not even what we do. But you take around, look at the country and how many people do that. And you have a specialist agricultural school. Yeah, they exist.
Yep.
But why would you have, subjects? I mean, we go back to algebra, but like, even like, a bunch of things that you had to write essays on, certain books you had to read or TV shows you had to watch or whatever. It's like, there's skills I'm not using today,
Oh yeah, no, 100%. 100%. And every kid is different. But I do think that, there needs to be education, and even as part of the trade, there needs to be an education there, like a small business course or something that's an option for people to be able to do.
Do you know, going down this rabbit hole here, I have a theory that it used to be the case that you would look up to, let's say, a doctor, right? You look up to a doctor and you would respect a doctor who had opinions outside of their field because they were someone who was intelligent, smart. They obviously worked hard to get their stuff. And no offense to doctors, they obviously are. They work hard. I've got family members who are doctors, blah, blah, blah. But if they had an opinion on, let's say, politics, you'd be like, man, they should know something because they're smart. Do you know what? I actually think it's going to happen over time that the most educated people on politics will be truck drivers, gardeners, cleaners, tradesmen. Because what are they doing all day? Listen to podcasts. And someone who's interested in politics will listen to politics podcasts.
Yeah.
And the most educated people on politics will be truck drivers, farmers. And what will happen over time, and I'm just using politics as a category, but the same thing to do with health and fitness, the same thing to do with, you pick any niche, the history of art in medieval times. Like, people who have a passion, you're out in the field doing things that are pretty mindless and you can listen to podcasts all day. And
that's what I do. I listen to podcasts, I listen to audiobooks, and it's either educational or entertainment, but there's always something going. The only time we have music on a job site now is if we've got a big job and we've got a site radio going. Otherwise, if we're kind of tinkering with more detailed stuff, we usually just have a headphone in, just listening to that.
I will only listen to music once I've run out of my talking stuff I listen to. Because I also, on top of podcasts, I got YouTube Premium, and so I will listen to the news. Right, there's a couple of independent news journalists on YouTube who will put out 10-minute segments on a news story, not the 2-minute one you might get from the ABC. They actually talk about it more. They get more So I can pick and choose the new stuff, and I like sports, so I'll listen to a lot of pundits talking about what happened on the weekend or this or that, and there's YouTube channels, and then I'll listen to podcasts. And once I get like say 6 hours into the day, I'm listened out, and I just want something mindless. Then the music comes on or nothing.
Then put the country music on and kick back.
Put on some Keith Urban, bit of Sweet Thing. Oh mate, how we got it? Oh my goodness, it's 2 hours and 23 minutes.
Do we hold the record yet?
No, you got about 6 more minutes to go. Do you want to break the record?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I mean, it's so close. Why would you say no? I still have more questions, believe it or not.
Yeah, there's still so much we could talk about.
I do. I like listening. I like it when someone else has a podcast, who's done a podcast, because I listen to the podcast and I write all the questions I would have asked, or people might start going down a subject as a rabbit hole and they come back on the main thing, like, let's follow that rabbit hole. Tell me about work ethic. You messaged me before about how you, like I've said before, it's common for me to work till about 11 o'clock at night. The way I try and do things, like for example, last night I came back from Esperance holiday, 9 o'clock at night. I'm up in the morning, 7 o'clock. I need a bit more of a sleep because Esperance, by the way, for those who don't know, that was an 8.5 hour drive. So I was pretty tired. Got my sleep, straight to worked, got home at maybe 5 o'clock. We were supposed to do this podcast at 6 o'clock. Family time, bang, for an hour. When you were running late and I was like, don't stress. Honestly, I was like, that's why I was like, message me when you're back, because I'm just going to go, I was hanging out with my kids before they go to bed. So dedicated family time. Usually I do it for a little bit more, but maybe about 7 o'clock, once they're down, I'll work again. Not every night. And then Wednesdays, I have a dedicated date night with my wife. So we're getting quality time there. But I reckon twice a week, I'm 11 p.m. So I'll do a 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. day. I love it, right? Because I'm getting on top of things. And for me, I also will only work a Saturday. And I do not work Sundays, right? But I will only work a Saturday if I absolutely have to. So I would prefer to smash out massive days. I prefer to do, just in 16-hour days and a full weekend dedicated to family time.
Yeah.
And you actually get somewhere with that,
Yeah.
So tell me about you.
No, I'm very similar to that. So we are on site at 7:30 on our job site. So no matter where we are, we're on site at 7:30. So if it's 10 minutes down the road, that's always much nicer. But my next design and project is an hour and 20 minutes from here. So we'll be getting up a bit earlier. So we're on site at 7:30 and then we work till 4 o'clock. So we'll do 8 hours on site. And then it's travel back, depending on where my project is. I like to try and be home around the 4:35 mark, only just because that's more of like the witching hour at home where the 3 kids just go wild.
Yes.
So I like to try and get back to try and help my wife out with that. And then we'll do, kind of family time where it's get home from work, see the kids, then it's, dinner, bath, bed. And that can go through till, I don't know, really maybe 8 o'clock, 8:30 at the moment. They're still fairly young, just depending on how feral the youngest one, Saddam Hussein, is acting on the night. And then once that's all done and settled, then it's, back on. I don't have admin staff, so it's back on to doing all that kind of stuff, all designs, after hours, scheduling, organising, everything like that. I'm more than happy to work till midnight, 1 in the morning, every day during the week. Saturdays, I will do consultations for design consultations if they're coming through. I always do them on a Saturday. But my son plays he's just started playing basketball on Saturday, so I try and schedule it around that as well. Because I've got no dramas with working hard, but if I'm not going to be around them, what is the point of having a family with young kids? Because it's just a matter of time until they grow up and they're too cool for school and they don't want to be around mum and dad and they want to go off and do their own thing with their own friends. So why would I sacrifice my time with them now? So if clients say to me, that doesn't work, we need you to come out here on a Sunday, well, I'm sorry, I'm not the right fit for you. It's not going to happen. Sunday's family time. So I'm happy to do a consult on a Saturday, and then I might go to a consult in the morning and then shoot off to my son's basketball game after that. But yeah, weekends it's family time, unless Christmas rush or something's gone wrong, and we can't like help it. But no, I like to spend Saturday with the families. We'll go to my son's sports games. Friday nights usually football down at the local club where he's just started playing down there. Saturdays basketball, and then Sundays family day. So we might go have a breakfast, and then my poor family get dragged off to all the different show gardens in the local areas because I want to go and explore, and that's what I like doing. But we'll go for the country drive, all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, the reason why I want to talk about this is I think there's a culture that's like, because there's workaholism, right? But then there's people who just work hard. And if you enjoy your work, right? So if you look at my life, I used to, right? But I don't really have hobbies, right? But I don't miss not having hobbies. You know what I mean? Like, I don't play video games. I don't play sport anymore. I would like, if I could, that would be one of the things that I would want to do. But I'd prefer to go watch my kids, but they're not old enough. But like, I'm just at a stage now. But I just really like what I do. And so I would prefer to come home. So tonight was different because the podcast at 6, but usually it's like 5 till 7. I'll just try and not do any work at all, right? And often I don't have to. If I don't have to do work, I won't do anything. Just have a night with the family. But I'd prefer to just be not intense as in over the top and tiresome and aggressive or anything like that. But I guess intentional is probably the word, and focused, and being like, I'm doing work now, and we're doing family time now. And I think what happens is a lot of people, they get exhausted and burnt out because I've talked about this before in businesses like when you want to grow a business, it's like driving a car that only has a couple of gears. There's a lot of gears missing. So you're in first gear and there's a comfortable rev range, but it's pretty slow. If you want to go faster, let's say your next gear is fourth, you got to rev the guts out of first, and then you change into fourth and it's struggling. And it's struggling, and then you get into a comfortable zone again. And those middle periods is where people lose their business. You talked about it before. You either got to go really big or you got to go small, sort of thing. And it's that middle zone where people really suffer. And the only way to get out of that is to rev the heck out of the engine. And so if you have ambitions to do anything big, and I'm not saying everybody should, because that's for you to decide for your own life, but you've got to rev. And if you're not prepared to rev, what will happen is these guys they'll get into the business and they'll come home and they will neither spend time with their family or work. They end up just wasting it on their phone or playing video games or watching movies or whatever. It's sort of like halfway in between. And I think that's what you can kill. If you look at your week and you go, how much time do I waste on that sort of stuff? You can get rid of that and work harder if you enjoy your work and you're not exhausted and burnt out and all that sort of stuff. And then you get somewhere.
I agree. I say that, but that family time of, say, let's call it 5 till 7, for argument's sake, that's prime time for me to be posting something on Instagram where it's going to be engaged with people and stuff like that. So that's like a tricky thing there too. From like a marketing point of view, because that's my prime time to post is 6 o'clock, which I know from my business insights. So what I've started doing now is I'll figure out what I'm going to post for maybe like the next week, and I'll just have it all written out, and it's just like a copy and paste, post it at 6 o'clock, bang, put the phone down. I've kind of always had a really bad tendency to sit there and scroll through, or I might be watching a movie with the kids and I'm scrolling through my phone while I'm doing it. And then in June, we went over to Fiji. We had 2 weeks over in Fiji, family holiday, first international family holiday. Really looking forward to it. I lost my phone at Melbourne Airport on the way to the plane. It was the most intense, stressful couple of hours looking for the phone. Like, I couldn't find it. We're calling them, find my iPhone. It's not working. Don't know what's going on.
Wow.
And then, so I'm stressed out. I'm grumpy. I'm just miserable to be around. And then I just went, stuff it. It is what it is. Like, I've spent a fortune to come on this trip. I've worked my ass off to pay to come on this trip. I'm going to enjoy it. So it was stressful for that, that time where I was looking for the phone, and then we jumped on the plane, and I was happy. And my wife's like, "Oh, I really wasn't expecting that." And I'm like, "Well, apart from the fact that I don't have my phone to watch movies on because the iPads are given to the kids and stuff."
Yeah.
I said, who cares? And I had the best holiday of all time because I didn't have a
Yep.
phone to distract me in any way. So when my kids were swimming in the pool, my eyes were on them. When we were playing, like, my full attention was on them the whole time. It was the best trip. So, the next time that we do something like that, I won't go to the extreme of losing my phone, because coming back was such a pain in the bum trying to find all my work contacts and get it all reorganized. But
Yep. Yeah.
I'll chuck it in, I'll turn it off and chuck it in the glove box, because I was so much more engaged with my kids with that, 10 days away, just not having any distractions. It was amazing.
Yeah, and the actual time you spend together, because you might be in the same room, right? But if you're not connected, it's not the same thing,
That's it. And they grow up so quickly, man. Like, it's crazy how fast the time with my kids is going. Like, because my son is now in grade 2, and he actually goes to so we took over my family property 3 years ago. So he now sleeps in my old bedroom and goes to my old school.
Wow.
And there's still a couple of teachers there from when I went there. So
Wow.
it's like, I know how quickly that goes because I've been there, and now I'm watching my son go through it.
And it
So
feels like 3 weeks ago sometimes,
exactly, like, he's got they have a thing called the grade 2 sleepover, and he's so excited about it. Well, I had the grade 2 sleepover, and I still remember sleeping at the school in grade 2, and it doesn't feel like that long ago, but it was a lifetime ago
Yeah.
now. But it's just, time
Yeah.
goes quick, so enjoy it and make the most of what you've got.
So, I my wife's sister is 16 years younger. So same parents and everything. They had my wife's the oldest, and the sister is the youngest, and they had miscarriages and things like that. But it's really interesting because they look very, very similar, the two of them. And my daughter is 2.5. And I first met my sister-in-law, who is now my sister-in-law, Georgia, when she was 4.5, or even younger, because, my wife at that point was like 20,
Yeah.
and, or maybe even a little bit younger. Yeah. So anyways, Georgia's now 14 or something like that. And we're there on the weekend, and Georgia is playing with my daughter, right? And it's not quite, but it's a similar age difference between my daughter and Georgia as there is between Georgia and Carrie, my wife. And I said to Georgia, I was like, you remember when I first met you, and she does, because anyway, I actually stayed at their house in Esperance. That was the first time Georgia ever met me. I was like, remember when I told you about that trip we went around Australia? Did I talk to you about that before, at least today? Is that
No.
Oh yeah, I went around Australia, and my car got broken into Melbourne. I got those speeding fines.
Oh,
That was
yeah,
about
sorry.
3 hours ago when we started talking about that.
No.
So in that same
with
trip,
the bike riding. Yep.
in that same trip when we were in Esperance, we stayed at my future parent-in-law's house. That's a whole story in itself. So I was like, Georgia, remember that? And she's like, yeah, I remember that. And I was like, you are only a year and a half older than my daughter is, and then Emmy is right now. And Georgia was like mind explosion, because she felt so small, and so she didn't feel as small and as young as what Emmy is, but a year and a half is nothing. That will go so quick. So yeah, so true. But I just think if you added up, okay, your 40-hour work week plus your travel time, and then how much time do you waste on things that you don't enjoy? That you do enjoy but don't push you further forward, and don't really, they neither fill your tank or drain your tank. There's some things you do like that, they just fill your tank, hanging out with your friends, going, around a campfire, chatting about life. You spend hours doing that. It fills your tank. You're on your phone. It doesn't do that, but it sort of doesn't.
No, you're right. It doesn't. So my wife says, fill your cup. Like, she needs to get her cup filled. She says that all the time. and
Yep.
and she's a stay-at-home mum with our 3 kids, looking after the kids. It's like a crazy full-time job. But when you said before, like, you don't have hobbies anymore, like, I'm exactly the same. And I spend, the majority of my life working, but I'm in an industry that I love, I'm passionate about, and I enjoy. So it's, some days you don't want to get out of bed. You'd rather just roll over and just hit the snooze and stay there. But I think when we've got something that we enjoy, it kind of becomes a hobby as well. So for me, you know, I've got my family, my business, and gardens, but it's what I enjoy and it's a passion for me.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, it's a cliche, and I don't actually agree with this cliche entirely. But basically, the idea is if you find a job that you love, you'll, in brackets, never work a day in your life. That's not true.
Yep.
Because,
No,
like
it's
you
not,
say,
but
it's not true because there will be times where you'll have to do something that you actually don't like. So, for example, I don't like administration work, but I have to do it.
Yep.
As in, we have, I don't do all the admin in the business, but I have to help out in that. I'm not good at that. Certain jobs, I'm not good at. I don't enjoy as much. But the concept or the idea is true. It's just 100% specifically true in every single second of your life. But that's the idea. It's like, I think, so I used to run ultra marathons back in the day before all my health stuff happened. The only reason why I was doing that is because I knew, like we talked about, that I couldn't grow the business without massive pain because I was in the comfortable zone and I'd have to rev the heck out of my engine. And I didn't want to do it. I was in that season. I didn't want to do it. I wasn't, desiring it. But I needed something to stimulate me and challenge me. And so I got into running, got into ultra marathons. And I think that's why people get hobbies. But if your work is stimulating and challenging and enjoyable enough in and of itself, you don't feel like you need to chase those other things, So
from your point of view, like with you trying to grow your business, is that like financially you're making more money from doing that, or are you doing that from a way that you can maybe step back off the tools and focus on working on the business instead of in the business?
So here's the thing that's really interesting, and that's a good question. Thank you for inviting me on your podcast.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Joel Barnett, and
Welcome. And your co-host here is Luke Smith. No, when I was younger, it was vanity, right?
Yeah.
And to get really deep and philosophical with you, I think it was actually a father wound, right? Because my parents got divorced, and my dad went on the other side of the country and all that sort of stuff. And I liked gardening, and I liked the business side of it. Like, clearly, there's that underlying passion was there, but I wanted big numbers to prove that I was a human being who had significance, worth, and value. Yeah, to put it bluntly. And then the older you get, it's like, okay, you're not going to get that just through work, right? Like, anyways. So I had this whole thing, and over time, and one of the things about losing your health is I went from very, very capable, very fit and healthy to like completely, utterly useless physically, and essentially financially at the mercies of a very few small things going wrong because there's no more margin in the business. Again, you're playing with a 10% profit margin. If you are, again, nice round numbers, put it this way, 10%, if you're talking about profit, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is 9 days. If you're working a 10% profit margin, those 9 days is just paying expenses. Friday on the second week is profit. Yeah. The rough way of looking at it. So if Friday gets rained out, no profit.
Yeah.
People who don't run a business like this don't know. So incredibly difficult. Nothing I could do. I couldn't step in and make it. So I realized that, you've just got to do the best you can with where you're at. And at the end of it, I come back and I go, I don't want a big business for the sake of a big business. I actually don't want to make crazy money. The most profitable thing that I could probably do is probably what I'm doing right now, where I have one employee who is profitable and I just make a lot of money off my own hours, and the most profitable thing for me to focus on would be to get healthier and healthier so I could work 5 days a week. Because I do about 3 at the moment.
Yeah.
Right. If I could do that, I'd make more money off that than I would having probably 13 employees. Roughly, that's how it works out, because that's that middle zone. Yeah. Right. So if you look at where we were at with 13 employees, we were not actually profitable at 13 employees, like I said. Well, yeah, and when I say that, it was like it's crazy. It's deceptive as well. You might make $10,000 in a fortnight, and then have 6 weeks in a row where you lose $500, and then you have another week where it fluctuates. But over the course of the year, because of issues and this and that, whatever, the concept could have worked, didn't work our way. So, anyways, but what really drives me as a passion now is there are so many people who love gardening and who want it as a sustainable career, but there are no good paying options except for starting your own business.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people do not have what it takes, either because of the life stage they're at, where they have kids and responsibilities, so they've come into gardening later on. So they don't have what it takes in terms of they just can't do it financially because too much risk. So even if they could, or it's just not in their personality, and most people it's not in their personality. And so what actually drives me is I would like to make a business that can afford to pay people a median wage, which is like 80, 90, maybe $100,000 a year, depending on how long it takes us to be able to get there, and have that option across the country instead of it just being. So if I had 5 people across the country and they love their job and they're in the industry and they're actually earning good money, and these are people who have experience, like that would be awesome for me. And if you could grow that.
Like trying to do that as a franchise, or are you trying to have more control?
No, because I think the franchise model's been done, and there's massive limitations on a franchise model in terms of, like, you think about all the food franchises, incredibly good at certain things. I love my podcast with Jim Penman. It's just not my philosophy. I think we're more similar in that I'd prefer to do high end stuff. Yeah. So I'd prefer to have employees. So maybe if you're talking about food, you think about, say, Gordon Ramsay, who has multiple restaurants, but they're all high-end restaurants, or higher-end restaurants with employees, all that sort of stuff. That's one way of looking at it. And then you have McDonald's. I'm not really interested in McDonald's. Yeah. And you could probably do a franchise, but there are sacrifices. And look, it would be 3 hours to talk about it. But I want real employees who, if they could make $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year, working normal hours, not have to do till 11 p.m. at night, because not everybody's made the same way as us. Some people would hear what we said then and just go, that is the most disgusting thing I've ever heard of. I'd hate doing that. And I like gardening. And it's just, we're just wired differently. People are different. But someone work 40 hours a week, earn good wages, come home and be proud of what they do. Those jobs are so rare in our industry. And I would like to make it possible that could happen. So that's what drives me now.
And I think that comes back to the education thing again. Like earlier, I spoke about my influence from the UK and how I get a lot of my ideas and stuff from over there. Well, over in the UK, if you work in the same garden for your, I don't know if it's your career, or you do like, 10, 20, 30 years working over for a garden over there, then the royal family is sending out a medal with handwritten letters for your contribution to horticulture. We don't have that respect over here. Like, it's just, there's a long way for it to come. So I think like what you're doing with this is great. And I think if we can help educate people from whatever side or whatever manner, then that's a great thing to do.
Yeah. So we're going to try that. We're trialing. So the reason I won't say it on air, because it's just, I don't know if it's going to work or not. Right. But there's ways of just going about how you organize the business that will make things really efficient. And the employee that we have, the main guy that we have now, he's been with me for 3 years, and he knows that what we're trying to do, and we're just going to experiment with him essentially, so, and if it could take me a year to tune things before I even hire a second person, because I don't want to go back to a standard model, because there are limitations in that. And don't get me wrong, it can work, and it would have worked if we hadn't have had, there's actually 2 workers' compensation claims. One was one we talked about. We actually had a fraudulent workers' compensation claim for 60 weeks as well before that. And they overlapped by about a month. And so anyway, so we had a lot of problems externally that it can work. So if someone's out there like, oh my goodness, I'm trying to build a business that won't. No, it could work. If you could target the upper middle class at a higher than average hourly rate and do good services and be efficient and all that sort of stuff, it can work. But I just don't have the passion for that, because that would be more about the money side of things. Making an empire financially is just,
And it's funny too, like say like, I don't know if ego is the word that you use. I don't think it is, but when you're younger, you've got that ego and you want to be the biggest and the best and everything like that. And growing up, I was just to watch The Block on TV, and I'd be like, I want to be as big and as well known as Dave Franklin. Like Dave Franklin rules The Block. Like I want to be Franklin Landscapes, big, 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 big. I went up against Dave Franklin, little guy from Kangaroo Ground, and I lost to him by 1 point. And I was like, you don't need to be that big, big company to put your name out there and produce that good work. And now I'm just focused on quality over quality over quantity. So we don't have to smash out as many, but what we do put out there, I want it to be the highest quality that can be.
Yeah. So, and your I think what you're doing, and there's a few other guys in and girls in different spheres to what you're doing. So, hedge trimming or lawn care or whatever it is in their niche. I think what you're doing with that is the best path, all things considered. You can make money off it. You'll actually enjoy a lot of what you do. You'll feel that pride and satisfaction that you're not just somebody who's, a low-level lawn mowing guy, or whatever, weed puller. And I think a lot of people, they look at that and they go, that's what I want, especially when you've got, sexy reels and Instagram photos and, some,
it's
appreciation
funny,
from that.
I've been very lucky with my career to have a lot of opportunities to go to, like for argument's sake, the Melbourne Flower and Garden Show, where I've worked there the last 2 years. You have all the big awards nights and the events nights throughout the industry where you have the big, big names of the industry walking around. And majority of people in our industry are lovely. Some people at the very top of the high-end design market, they kind of think that they might be a bit better than other people. And I always find that really amusing because I'm like, at the end of the day, we're all dirt monkeys and we're all just, having a go at it. And we're a trade, essentially. I don't care if you're a designer, you're a maintenance guy, or you're a landscaper. Like we're all out there playing in the dirt and trying to make this work. So, I don't know. People need to be reminded of the industry that we're in and just enjoy it.
You gotta think about as well, like why. Like, here's the thing about Jason Hodges, you were saying before, right? I've only had maybe one phone call with him. I messaged him. We've had some mutual contracts on, and he was like, he hasn't come on yet, so I shouldn't talk him up too much. But the phone conversation I had with him was, at the time, I think we're about 8 episodes in or something, very low, and this unproven sort of, I'd never met him before, whatever. Talked to him on the phone, fantastic guy, just a real human being, and he was on TV. They won a Logie, I think. Like, you don't get bigger than that in Australian TV, basically. But as a human being, he was totally fine. It's like, it's not like I've got 1 million followers or something like that, And the podcast has grown from then. And anyways, yes, I'd like to get him on. But I've had chat with Joel and off air about those sorts of experiences as well. The evil, demonic, lovely, Sir Joel.
Yeah.
I can't just refer to him normally now, as we, the zinger to my box, Joel. Oh, okay, box sounds a bit too dodgy there. I just realized that was a lot more sexual than I really thought it was going to come out as.
It's like the start of the opening to his podcast this week. Oh, God.
Oh, dear. Honestly, I've just pulled out my headphones as well doing this. Anyways, I think I've waken up my child with that laugh as well. My wife is going to be very angry.
The same thing as, you say how like nice Jason is. Charlie Albone is exactly the same too. Like, he was on Selling Houses Australia. He's on Better Homes and Gardens now, and he's one of the nicest people that you ever meet. Like, I've met him in person a bunch of times now. He's great with banter. Like, he's a real big one on banter and kind of, you know, poking the bear as we all seem to do. Um, so, you know, there's some, and again, like, high names, and they're willing to give you their time and speak to everybody. They're just, the majority of people in this industry are just lovely people.
Yes, and that comes back to what I was talking about with the opportunity to take on mining. You know,
Mm.
4 years ago, whatever it was. You don't get that in that industry. You know, I've got
No,
friends in mining, and they don't have the love and the passion like we have the love and the passion, and
that's a
it's
dollar game, isn't it? You're
it is.
not digging holes looking for gold for the love of it. You're doing it because you want the money.
And then it creates this culture. And I've got a friend who did a degree that wasn't mining related, but not specifically, but you know, could transfer into lots of different industries, and you know, ended up getting a job in mining. And the only reason why he's staying in his role is actually because he wants to get a couple of years on his belt before he moves, because it's his first role out of university,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't want it to look bad. You know, like he picked a job and jumped ship quickly, but the culture, he hates the culture, and it's very selfish. And so I think in the industry, the people who work in this industry have sort of admitted that it's probably not the best. I mean, some of them, it is the best financial thing for them because they might have come out of, you know, being a sandwich artist or whatever it was. But you know, a lot of the driving force for a lot of people is they want to be outside and they love what they do.
Yeah,
and they're very supportive. Like,
there's easier ways to make money, but it's you do it because you love it.
Yep. All right, mate. Well, how are we going? I mean, do you want to make it to 3 hours?
I just don't know if 3 hours is official because, you know, off the record, you did pause the podcast to run off to go to the toilet. So
that's true. I don't.
3 hours or not.
And that was about 3 hours. So, well, let's start wrapping up now, man. Because my wife is going to be like, "What the hell is going on here?" And also, I was planning to get this podcast out tonight. Yeah, we can still try. I said I was committed to 11 o'clock at night. It's 9:35. So, where can people find you?
Instagram is probably the best place. So it's just Ashley James Gardens, or you can jump on the website ashleygardens.com and you can see portfolio and get in touch there, see what we do and what services we offer. But basically, we're a very small company now, but we do design, install, and horticultural services. I say we're small, but we still tackle big projects because we have some really good subcontractors and just contractors in general that we work with.
Yep. And you've done a lot of big stuff in the past before, you know, 6-figure plus projects.
Yep.
I know, because you said in the podcast with the Lord himself, Joel Barnett.
Yeah, well, it's Instagram, I suppose, and you know, again, my wife gave me a kick up the bum about it. But when I'm posting so much of my garden and, you know, just digging tomatoes and stuff like that, it's almost like people forget what we actually do. But you know, we do design. You know, the average garden for us, I guess, is probably over 100,000. So you know, we'll work on gardens from probably 50, 60,000 up to. Last year we had 2, which we finished just before Christmas last year, and they were $500,000 each. So, you know, we kind of vary and go all over the place. But yeah, we do some big stuff as well.
That's crazy. Last time we did the episode that was the biggest, which was with Nick, and that was a very popular episode as well, from Lawns and Good Nick. We said, send a photo of a Pepsi Max, right, if you made it to the end. What should we do now? Like, because a lot of people made it to the end of that one. What should we say? Send a photo to us of Joel Barnett.
I think it's got to be something with Joel.
Yeah, it has to be.
It has to be something to do with Joel. Do you know what's funny? So I met Joel and I'm sorry, I will let you go to your wife at some point. But I met Joel at the Melbourne Flower and Garden Show years ago. Didn't think he knew who I was. We then ran into each other years later down the track when we were both working on the block together, and caught up, said g'day, and he goes, yeah, I remember we met at the Flower and Garden Show. Yep, cool. You know, he's playing it cool that he's not that huge celebrity that he knows that he is. And then For years, I bugged him for a signed autographed photo, and
Right.
and he was trying to charge me $20 for one, and I think I paid for one in the end, and I've got a signed autographed photo of him. So I'll have to scan that and send that over to you. He's a funny bugger. And again, like I stuffed this up because I thought that our podcast chat was on Thursday night, not tonight. But I did plan on having a poster of Joel with devil horns blown up and put in the background there. So
You've had a David Jones bag in the back corner the whole time. And I didn't realize that when we set up, and I was like, I'll just leave it. After we started recording, I didn't want to embarrass you. Do you know what? That's
so
actually
you thought, I won't embarrass him at the start. We'll just run for 3 hours.
Most people are not going to make it to the end, so I wasn't embarrassing you in front of the majority of the audience. But what's in there? It might be something like lingerie or something. That would be really embarrassing. Okay, it's just to pretend like you shot there. It's actually so you went there just in the bag.
Just trying to keep up with Joel and the money that he's turning over.
You can either send us a picture of Joel Barnett, but if you don't have a picture of Joel Barnett, take a screenshot of something to do with David Jones. Send that through. And I'm working on some goodies to send out to people who I can't talk about now, but I did say in the end of the last podcast, I might send out some goodies of a similar vein to what and Hamish and Andy do with their coin.
Mm-hmm.
And they send out a coin to listeners. So I'm thinking of something around that line that is a sort of little merch thing, just a small little gift that people can get. And so, look, if you made it to the end of this, well done. Send us a photo of either Joel Barnett or mention something about Joel Barnett and how fantastic or horrible he is. Either way, we're fine. Or send a photo of David Jones stuff. And yeah. And what Ash will do is he will give you a big cuddle and a kiss if he ever sees you in public.
What I will do, because it's just come through, which I probably should have mentioned earlier, if you jump on my Instagram, I haven't posted it yet, but if you jump on at some point this week, I've got a discount code for my followers. If you like what I've done around my kitchen garden with the wildflowers, they've given another discount code to pass on to people. So you can jump on there and score yourself some cheaper wildflowers, which are the easiest things to grow at home, and you will love them. Again, no sponsorship with those guys. They're just an Australian company that I love their product, and anyone that I'm happy to get behind. So
you're all about the love of it, not the money.
That's it.
So, all right. We cracked over 3 hours.
There you go.
See you later.
See you, mate.